Chapter 2677. This was the woman whom the mysterious man, the future Lu Shiyun, fell in love with. This innocent woman, who looked only 16 or 17 years old, had a beautiful face and a delicate voice, which made people involuntarily sink into her beautiful voice. However, such an angelic woman unintentionally ruined Lu Shiyun's life and made Lu Shiyun crazy to take revenge on Yun Jian. "Sister Yun Jian, I'm sorry. It's my fault. I didn't expect him to be so obsessed with me. Maybe my birth was a tragedy." The woman, who was deeply loved by Lu Shiyun, looked at Yun Jian, put her hands behind her waist, and gave Yun Jian an apologetic smile. The words that came out of the woman's mouth were as pure as her beautiful voice, which brought people an unforgettable experience. "By the way, Sister Yun Jian, you don't seem to know me now. Then let me introduce myself again. My name is Xiang Weilan. My dream is to be as pure and flawless as the clouds in the blue sky one day." Xiang Weilan happily introduced herself to Yun Jian with a smile. With a smile, Xiang Weilan turned around and reached out her clean little hand to the mysterious man, the future Lu Shiyun. "Shiyun, it's time for us to go to a place where no one knows us. This time, I don't want to let go of your hand. I want to be as pure and flawless as the clouds in the sky, even if I'm unacceptably dirty. Just like what you said before. I'm the purest person in the world. I believe in you. In the future, I don't want to let go of your hand anymore." The mysterious man's phantom was holding his head and squatting on the ground. After hearing Xiang Weilan's words, he slowly put down his ears and slowly stood up. The moment he put his hand in Xiang Weilan's, the two hands that could never be held together again, Xiang Weilan held the mysterious man's hand and the mysterious man slowly stood up. The wind once again blew past this place, bringing with it a dense fragrance. Dandelions that came out of nowhere lingered around Xiang Qinglan and the mysterious man. The figures of Xiang Weilan and the mysterious man gradually dissipated under the lingering dandelions. Finally, they turned into two ordinary dandelions and flew into the blue sky together with the other dandelions floating in the sky. To the blue, she yearned to soar to the blue sky. She did it. She told herself that in the future she could also be as white as the clouds floating in the sky. Yun Jian learned the story of Xiang Weilan and the future Lu Shiyun from the notebook left by Lu Shiyun in 2004. Lu Shiyun had always had the habit of taking notes. From the notebook left behind by Lu Shiyun, Yun Jian learned that the future Lu Shiyun had already found the present Lu Shiyun and told him everything that had happened in the future. Xiang Weilan was a prostitute. When the future Lu Shiyun first met her, she was singing in a bar. Her melodious voice attracted Lu Shiyun. Xiang Weilan also fell in love with Lu Shiyun, who took care of her, but she didn't dare to tell Lu Shiyun about her lowly identity. She was dirty, very dirty, so dirty that even she despised herself. But in order to survive, in order to eat, in order to survive, she sold herself. Later, Lu Shiyun found out about her past. He didn't despise her, but she despised herself. Later, for Lu Shiyun, Xiang Weilan refused to accept any more customers. Unknowingly, she offended the big shots and was beaten up countless times. But she didn't dare to tell Lu Shiyun, afraid that he would feel bad. She was afraid of hurting Lu Shiyun, so she left Lu Shiyun in the name of betrayal. She also begged the future Yun Jian not to save her if she died, because she couldn't face Lu Shiyun anymore. Later, Xiang Weilan died. She was raped and killed by the big shots and stabbed to death. Lu Shiyun knew that Yun Jian had superb medical skills. He hugged Xiang Weilan and begged Yun Jian to save her, but he was cruelly rejected by Yun Jian. Men in love were usually irrational. Because of this, he hated Yun Jian and felt that Yun Jian did it on purpose. The name Xiang Weilan was given by Xiang Weilan herself. She hoped that one day she could fly towards the blue sky, as white and flawless as the clouds floating in the sky, as clean as her singing. She did it. She flew towards the blue sky. She did it. Chapter 2678. Lu Shiyun and Xiang Weilan's story was both beautiful and sad. It was the summer of 2015. Lu Shiyun, who was rushing home from the military, passed by a bar street near his home. Originally, he was in a hurry to go home, but when he passed by, he was attracted by a melodious song that sounded like the chirping of an oriole. Humans are emotional creatures and they can't help but be attracted by things that can attract them. Lu Shiyun stepped into the bar and saw a young lady sitting at the front desk. She seemed to have experienced a lot. The girl's eyelashes were very long, and under the neon lights, her slender figure was beautiful. Lu Shiyun felt that the moment he stepped into the bar, the girl raised her eyes slightly and looked back at him. She didn't know that this glance completely changed the fate of both of them. From then on, Lu Shiyun couldn't help but step into this bar every day just to see the girl. Over time it became a habit. But the two of them never said a word to each other. Until one day when Lu Shiyun heard a young girl singing a beautiful melody, he turned around and left. The girl put down the microphone and rushed out of the bar. She took out a wallet from her pocket and handed it to Lu Shiyun. "Sir, this is the wallet you accidentally dropped yesterday. When I picked it up you were already gone. Take it back." The girl kept her head down the whole time. Lu Shiyun finally saw the girl's face at close range. Just like the girl's singing, the girl's face was as small as a palm. Lu Shiyun took the wallet, but before he could thank her, the girl turned and ran away. From then on, Lu Shiyun still came to watch the girl sing every day, but the two of them never got to know each other. Until one day, Lu Shiyun turned to leave after listening to the girls singing. Suddenly there was a burst of noise behind him. "Let me go. Let me go." The girl's cry for help was immediately heard. It was a dozen big men who rushed up and dragged the girl out. One of the big men raised his hand and slapped the girl, causing her ears to ring and a heavy bruise to appear on her face. "Bitch, don't pretend to be virtuous. If you don't listen, I'll strip you naked on the spot." The big man roared, raised his hand and was about to give her another heavy slap. But this slap, before it fell into the girl's hand, it was caught by a large hand. It was Lu Shiyun. "Yo, little brat, why aren't you letting go of me? Be careful, I'll find someone to kill you." But before the last three words left the man's mouth, Lu Shiyun didn't even look at him. He raised his hand and placed a document in front of the group of men. "Police." After seeing the clear handwriting on the document, the group of burly men was stunned. "Consider yourself lucky." Seeing this, the large man spat at the young girl and left with his men. Lu Shiyun personally escorted the girl back to her residence, a dilapidated slum that couldn't be any more dilapidated. "Well, thank you." Just as Lu Shiyun was about to leave, the girl who had been silent all this time finally spoke. After 2 seconds of silence, the girl suddenly turned around and gave Lu Shiyun a smile that would make Lu Shiyun fall for her for the rest of his life. "My name is Xiang Weilan. It's a name I gave myself. My dream is to be as pure and flawless as the clouds in the blue sky one day. What about you?" The girl's smile made Lu Shiyun blush. Since then, Lu Shiyun and the girl got to know each other, understood each other, and were attracted to each other. In the end, they couldn't escape love. Xiang Weilan kept telling herself that she was just greedy for his goodness. After a while she would leave. He was a soldier and she shouldn't hold him back. A dirty girl like her wasn't good enough for him. Xiang Weilan was sold into a brothel by her mother when she was young and was forced to serve customers. She named herself Xiang Weilan because she wanted to be as pure and flawless as the clouds in the blue sky one day. She longed for a clean life. After falling in love with Lu Shiyun, Xiang Weilan used the money she had accumulated over the years in exchange for a chance to redeem herself. Although she was beaten up by her mother in the brothel in the end, she was able to escape. Lu Shiyun didn't know about it. He introduced her to Yun Jian and the rest of Team Monarch. She also got to know Yun Jian, who stood at the peak of everyone. Those were the happiest days of Xiang Weilan's life. She was carefree as if she was really living the life of her dreams. However, the good times didn't last. In the winter of 2017, the leader of the group of burly men who dragged her away from the bar came looking for her again. He was an international big shot. However, Xiang Weilan wasn't willing to serve any more customers. She didn't want to betray Lu Shiyun. However, the other party threatened her that if she didn't go, they would destroy Lu Shiyun's future and bright future. Xiang Weilan agreed, but she didn't dare to tell anyone. She only secretly looked for Yun Jian and told Yun Jian that if she was about to die one day, she begged her not to save her. Because a dirty person like her didn't have the right to spend the rest of her life with Lu Shiyun. Other than that, she didn't say anything else. Xiang Weilan knelt and kowtowed to Yun Jian until her head bled. Only then did Yun Jian agree to her. The purity that was lost could never be regained. No one was willing to give up. Xiang Weilan's wish was very small. She only hoped that her body could be as pure and flawless as the clouds, but she would never have the chance to do so. Chapter 2679. In order to completely disappear from Lu Shiyun's world, Xiang Weilan found all kinds of men and made out with them in front of Lu Shiyun. However, after Lu Shiyun quarreled with Xiang Weilan and left in anger, Xiang Weilan chased away the men who pretended to be her customers and hid in her room to cry. In order to make Lu Shiyun give up on her, Xiang Weilan even belittled him loudly. "You're just an ordinary person. You can't even compare to the money I earned under Mama Sang. How are you going to support me? I want a high-quality life, but what can you give me? I just think that you're good-looking, so I'm playing with you. Do you really think that I've met love? Xiang Weilan's words were very firm. Because she had to pretend in front of the big bosses in the past, her words and expressions made Lu Shiyun unable to find any loopholes. After walking out of the room, Xiang Weilan dragged her luggage and squatted not far away from Lu Shiyun's house. She cried silently for the entire night. The next day she went to the place where the big shot was. Who knew that the big shot had a strange habit? When she was forced to go to the big shot's house, there were more than a dozen of the big shot's friends waiting for her. Yes, the big shot's strange habit was that he liked to have sex with a group. Xiang Weilan refused to comply. In the end, she swallowed a glass shard and failed to commit suicide. This group of people lost their minds. After Xiang Weilan swallowed the glass shard and failed to commit suicide, they raped her. However, on the other side, Lu Shiyun received news that when he saw Xiang Weilan, she was already dying. Lu Shiyun loved her too deeply. He carried Xiang Weilan to seek treatment from Yun Jian. Xiang Weilan could no longer speak, but she said to him in a shrill voice, "I've never loved you. I just regret accepting their invitation today. I didn't expect them to make me eat glass shards. Otherwise, with my ability, I would definitely be able to live a good life." This sentence hurt Lu Shiyun both physically and mentally. When he found Yun Jian and asked for treatment, Yun Jian refused without even looking at him. To Lu Shiyun, when Xiang Weilan betrayed him, his loved one had just died in a car accident, and he was betrayed by the woman he loved. There was no way to seek treatment. Lu Shiyun knew that Yun Jian had the ability to save Xiang Weilan, but she didn't do anything. Perhaps his love was too deep. After Xiang Weilan's death, Lu Shiyun was completely dispirited. He became silent and didn't say a word. Finally, in 2018, the group of big shots who had killed Xiang Weilan were suddenly killed in a bar. The group of big shots were badly mutilated and dismembered. Their deaths were extremely tragic. The police found out that the person who killed this group of people was Lu Shiyun. By the time Lu Shiyun was fully apprehended, he was already nowhere to be found. After Xiang Weilan and Lu Shiyun transformed into dandelions and left with the wind, the truth was no longer known by those familiar with it. However, at the last moment, the two of them left behind two phantoms, embracing each other. They were happy. Back when Yun Jian was in the future world, which was 2019, she found out that the incident that happened in Longmen City was Lu Shiyun who had killed the group of big shots and dismembered them. It was because the perpetrator was Lu Shiyun, and after checking the suspect file given by Zhou Yiran, Yun Jian guessed that the mysterious person was Lu Shiyun. Returning to reality, Xiang Weilan and Lu Shiyun's phantoms completely disappeared before Yun Jian and the rest. Everything was over. The barrier had been broken. Other than the thousands of people who were still frozen, everything that happened just now was like a nightmare. Mother. At that moment, a tall and handsome figure dashed out from the forest beside them. It was none other than the newcomer. It was the grown-up Si Tua, also known as Xing Feng, who was being held captive by the mysterious person. Xing Feng was handsome, inheriting Si Yi's looks. When Xing Feng appeared, he rushed to Yun Jian almost instantly, reaching out to hug Yun Jian. However, just as he called out "Mother," and was about to hug his long-lost mother, Si Yi tripped him. Si Yi suddenly tripped Xing Feng with his foot and pulled Yun Jian into his arms, glaring menacingly at Xing Feng. Xing Feng was speechless. Chapter 2680. Xing Feng shuddered when he saw Si Yi. He touched his head and stopped in his tracks. Ever since the God's continent was created, Xing Feng had spent so many years trying to change the fate of his parents. He had almost forgotten what his biological father looked like. With Si Yi around, he, as a son, could not even think about touching his mother, not even once. Xing Feng helplessly touched his handsome nose, then glanced at Si Yi. Father? Xing Feng still had an instinctive fear of Si Yi. When Xing Feng and Zhou Yiran were young, Si Yi had thrown them into the Amazon forest and they had suffered a lot. Young master, we have successfully completed the task you gave us. Xing Feng rushed over. Behind him, Adam, Mo Sen, Shuaying, and Lin Wei had also arrived. When the four leaders of the Inhun organization appeared, Adam took the lead and told Si Yi the good news that they had completed the task. In return, Si Yi softly replied, The four leaders of the Inhun organization did not arrive during the battle between Yun Jian and Si Yi. Even Di Lin, Leng Mei, and the others from the Blood Doll organization did not arrive because Si Yi had given them a task. That was to save Xing Feng. After Xing Feng was saved, he used his last bit of spiritual power to summon the phantom of the deceased Xiang Weilan. Phantom was a general term used by cultivators for people without a physical body or soul. It was a remnant will in the human world, nothing more. That was why Xiang Weilan and Lu Shiyun had turned into dandelions and flew into the blue sky. At least, their phantoms, which were their wills, were together. At the last moment they had left with smiles. Ah. Work is done, work is done. Mother, how long has it been since I've eaten your cooking? How about you cook for me tonight and let me have a free meal? Xing Feng touched his nose and led the way forward. After taking 2 steps he suddenly turned around. His handsome CE face was filled with anticipation. Upon hearing that Xing Feng wanted Yun Jian to cook for him, CE's face instantly darkened. Yun Jian was good at everything except spinning hula hoops and cooking. In the end, Xing Feng said that he had eaten Yun Jian's cooking. Even if it was a meal cooked by the future Yun Jian for Xing Feng, CE's handsome face was tinged with annoyance when he heard what she said. Hey mother, why don't you make my favorite food when I was young? I recall it's that. After Xing Feng finished speaking, he turned around and walked in front of Yun Jian and CE. He even rested his chin on his hand solemnly, carefully recalling the name of the dish Yun Jian had cooked for him back then. Xing Feng took 2 steps in front of Yun Jian and CE. As he walked, a slender leg suddenly reached out from behind and hooked onto Xing Feng's long leg. This sudden attack caused Xing Feng to fall flat on his face. The ground was covered with grass mixed with mud that had been moistened by the rain. Not to mention how moist Xing Feng's face was when he suddenly fell to the ground. Xing Feng stood up and scolded angrily, Who? Oh, who has the guts to trip my foot? Xing Feng swept his eyes over the scene. In the end, when his eyes landed on Adam's group of 4, he suddenly saw Shui Ying's eyes glance to the side. This must be the culprit who tripped him and caused him to fall flat on his face. Xing Feng glared fiercely in the direction Shui Ying had indicated. However, he saw a handsome face that was 80% similar to his, except that the features were more distinct. Chapter 2681. When he realized that the person who had tripped him was actually his own father, Xing Feng even had the thought of dying. Father? Father, why did you trip me for no reason? Look at my clothes, they're all stained with mud. Although Xing Feng had lived for so many years and had a face that was 80% similar to Si Yi's, his personality was completely different from Si Yi's. Si Yi was the kind of person who was so cold that people didn't dare to approach or talk to him. Other than the woman he loved, he wouldn't care about anyone else. Although Xing Feng had a handsome face that was identical to Si Yi's, and even inherited that cold appearance, he was completely different from Si Yi. He was the kind of person who liked to talk about things with humor. When he realized that the person who tripped him was actually his own father, Xing Feng was stunned. After being stunned, he immediately acted coquettishly. However, Xing Feng's coquettish behavior was met with a cold and merciless sentence from Si Yi. Get lost. Xing Feng naturally understood his father. He twitched the corner of his mouth, turned around and ran away in dejection. The next morning, the vice president of the martial arts club, Mo Bufan, scratched his head. He was sleeping on his big single bed at home. He turned over. Although the single bed was big, Mo Bufan was sleeping on the edge of the single bed. When he turned over, he directly rolled onto the ground. Oh whoa! Mo Bufan wailed. After howling, his consciousness gradually became clear. SSS, why do I feel like I had a very scary dream? What kind of dream was it? Why can't I remember? In my dream there seems to be Yun Jian? Mo Bufan scratched his head and muttered to himself. As he muttered, he stood up and put on his clothes. Thinking that it was just a dream, he decided not to think about it. After eating breakfast, he took a bus from home to school. As soon as he entered the classroom, he heard the students discussing. The one who led the discussion was Kai Huiling, who had a dispute with Yun Jian in university. Why did that little bitch appear in my dream? What the hell is going on? I don't want that bitch to appear in my dreams at all. And it seemed like she's slaying God, the #1 on the international secret agent ranking. What kosher mercenaries boss? In my dream, I seem to have dreamt that there were a few people who claimed to be kosher mercenaries standing behind that little bitch. I'm puzzled. She actually appeared in my dream in such a manner. Does she think she's a transformer or an armored warrior? Kai Huiling was chatting with some girls who didn't know what was going on about the dream she had yesterday. She mocked them while laughing. Mo Bufan scratched his head and walked past Kai Huiling. Strange, why did he seem to have achieved the dream she had? But Mo Bufan didn't think too much about it. Look, the Transformers and Armored Warriors are here. Kai Huiling pointed at the stairs with a mocking tone. Instead, he saw a slender young girl whose face had been moisturized by a man. Her breasts were full and her figure was slender. Yun Jian happened to pass by at that moment. Hearing Kai Huiling and the rest mocking her, Yun Jian's lips curled into a red arc. When she passed by Kai Huiling and the rest, she flashed a strange smile at Kai Huiling. The grin made Kai Huiling mock Yun Jian even more as she shouted at the latter's back, "What are you talking about? You're a transformer, aren't you?" She had a mocking smile on her face. However, just as Kai Huiling finished her sentence, she suddenly saw a butterfly knife appear in Yun Jian's empty hand. It was nothing much. However, looking at the shape of the butterfly knife, Kai Huiling suddenly recalled a scene in her mind. It was the scene where Yun Jian combined the three artifacts into the butterfly knife handle. When Kai Huiling snapped back to reality, she suddenly screamed in shock. The girls who were listening to her joke about Yun Jian were at a loss. That dream wasn't a dream. It's real. It's real, it's real. Chapter 2682. Kai Huiling slid to the ground like she was paralyzed, hugging her head as if she was frightened by something. The girls were bewildered. When they looked up at Yun Jian had already put away the butterfly knife that was transformed from 3 divine weapons and combined with the god-vanquishing blade. She doesn't have anything in her hands? Huiling, are you sure you saw wrongly? The girls exclaimed in shock. It was Kai Huiling who told the school about the dream she had yesterday early in the morning. She even compared Yun Jian to an armored warrior, saying that everything in the dream was hilarious. How could someone like Yun Jian be the top secret agent in the world? What boss of the kosher mercenaries? Now that she saw Yun Jian, she screamed like she had lost her mind. However, Yun Jian was already far away. After making sure that everyone thought it was a nightmare, Yun Jian returned to Longmen City. Xing Feng and Yuan Xing came from the future and should have left this era through the dimensional gateway. However, both of them refused to leave for a long time. What was more, Xing Feng and Yuan Xing stayed in Longmen City for a few days. Xueying and Si Luo had yet to give birth to Yuan Xing. In the next few days, Yuan Xing would often ask Xueying and Si Luo in front of everyone, "When are you guys giving birth?" He was anxious because he was about to be born in his past life, but Si Luo's stomach had yet to show any signs of pregnancy. His question made Si Luo cover his face and leave. "Don't stop me. I'm going to make him cry. Kid, who told you to bully me every day when you were young? You even stole my beloved little sister, didn't you? You brat." Xing Feng was held back by Mo Sen and Lin Wei as he glared at little Zhou Yiran, who was playing happily on the bed. Little Zhou Yiran was only 4 years old and had no idea that he was the one who bullied Xing Feng in the future. At this moment, Zhou Yiran was holding a group photo of him, the little fellow and the little girl. In front of Xing Feng, little Zhou Yiran looked at the photo and giggled. As he laughed, he suddenly smacked his lips on the little girl in the photo. Just as the atmosphere was about to explode, Xiao Zhou turned around and kissed the little guy in the photo. The little fellow was none other than Xing Feng himself. "Brat, let go of your mouth." Everyone in the villa could hear Xing Feng's roar clearly. On the day that Xing Feng and Yuan Jin left, Yun Jian saw Shinji again in the forest of time and space. Shinji from the future 2019. Shinji had come all the way from the future. In a dark corner of the forest, Yun Jian and Shinji looked at each other. "You're looking for you?" Yun Jian curled her lips at the seductive Shinji, who was in her 30s. "Yes." Shinji smiled gracefully and nodded at Yun Jian. "What's the matter?" Yun Jian asked again. The way the two of them interacted was always to speak as little as possible. "Yes." Shinji nodded. Finally, Shinji looked up at Yun Jian. 006, promise me something. Don't refuse. "Yes." Yun Jian looked up. She had thought that Shinji had come all the way from the future to 2004 to remind her not to forget to save him. After all, Yun Jian had the butterfly knife now. Under certain circumstances, it could bring someone back from the dead. And Yun Jian could save Shinji, who had already passed away. But Shinji only looked up and smiled bitterly. "Don't save me. I know you have the ability, but please don't save me." "Why?" Yun Jian wasn't surprised. 006, it's been so many years. I'm tired. Let me be free. Chapter 2683. Compared to her 20s, Shinji, who was in her 30s, was much more mature and detached from the world. If Shinji was like a wild rose with thorns in the past, the current Shinji standing in front of Yun Jian was like an old man without a care in the world. Hearing Shinji's words, Yun Jian fell silent. She was silent because if she hadn't met Ce, if she hadn't been reborn as Yun Jian, and if everything hadn't happened, then her choice would have been the same as Shinji's. In this world, no one understood Shinji better than she did. "Okay," Yun Jian uttered the word flatly from her lips. Hearing Yun Jian's words, Shinji smiled. Her smile was enchanting and playful. Then, if we have the chance to meet again in the next life, I will definitely defeat you before you grow up. 006 I Shinji haven't forgotten to surpass you. For generations to come, for all eternity. Shinji extended a hand to Yunjian, her piercing eyes glistening with tears as she guffawed, her words flowing smoothly. I'll be waiting. Yunjian clasped Shinji's hand with a smack. She wore a faint smile, just like how she had spent half her life as Shinji's enemy back in an Hun group. It was radiant and beautiful. You have to be happy. Shinji patted Yunjian's shoulder. She glanced at Ce, who was holding the little girl and carrying the little guy. Then she turned and walked towards the forest of time and space. The wind blew the fallen leaves on the ground, lifting them into the air and carrying them into the sky. In less than 2 seconds, the wind stopped without warning. All the leaves in the air fell back to the ground. Shinji was like a dancing leaf. The moment she was lifted by the wind, she was dazzling. Then she returned to her roots, leaving no trace behind. Her fiery red clothes fluttered in the wind. Shinji left in a hurry like a heroic heroine. She took away Yunjian's lifelong rival. This was the last time Yunjian would see Shinji. Yunjian stood in place and stared in the direction Shinji had left for a long time. She didn't come back to her senses until someone tugged at her clothes. Yunjian didn't come back to her senses. Mama. Mama's bag, Mama's bag. The little boy in Ce's hand tugged on Yunjian's clothes. Because he was being carried by Ce, the little boy swayed from side to side as if he was on a swing. She said, hug as bag. The little guy blinked his big eyes. He was so cute that people wanted to pinch his face. Yunjian turned around and saw the little guy who had suddenly started giggling after seeing something fun. Her heart skipped a beat. He reached out and hugged the little fellow, gently rubbing the little fellow's head. She looked up and saw Ce looking at her with a doting expression. Yes, she and Shinji already had a different life. A home full of color and love. She still had her dearest family waiting for her to return home. So she wasn't alone. For the first time, Ce let the little guy snuggle in Yunjian's arms. After Yunjian sent Shinji away, Xingfeng and Yuan Xing also left. After all, they weren't from this era. And the most important thing was that, the Lu Shiyun of this world is dead. His death should have changed the future. It should have even returned to the time before the mysterious man appeared. Xingfeng stood outside the forest of time and space as he analyzed. The Lu Shiyun of the modern world was dead. Logically speaking, the Lu Shiyun of the future wouldn't have had a chance to return to the beginning of the divine continent. Then none of this would have happened. This also meant that Yunjian as the sorcerer goddess and Ce as the divine lord wouldn't have come to Earth. Everything should have been restored to the time when everything had not happened. But don't worry. I've investigated. Because of the mysterious man, time and space have been distorted. Even if the mysterious man doesn't appear in the future, nothing will change now. But there's something bad I need to tell everyone. Xingfeng paused for a moment when he said this. In the end, he continued, the gate of time and space has started to dissipate. I estimate that in 20 minutes, the gate of time and space won't be able to be used again. In other words, if we go back to the future this time, we won't be able to return to 2004. Speaking of this, Xingfeng wasn't worried about not being able to see Yunjian and Ce again. He turned to Yuan Xing, if you don't do something now, you won't have another chance. Xingfeng knew that Yuan Xing treated Yiji differently. At this moment, Yiji was trembling behind Yunjian. She peeked out one eye to look at Yuan Xing, who was standing beside Xingfeng. Hearing Xingfeng's words, Yuan Xing's deep eyes flickered. Just when everyone thought that Yuan Lin would ask Yiji to wait for him for more than 10 years, Yuan Lin suddenly walked in front of Yiji and grabbed her wrist. He couldn't help but retort as he pulled Yiji towards Xingfeng. Follow me. After a pause, he was afraid that Yiji wouldn't agree, so he suddenly said in front of everyone, I'll marry you. Come. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2684. Yuan Xing's sudden confession gave everyone a fright. Even Xingfeng didn't expect that Yuan Xing, who had always been by his side, who had always placed importance on important matters, who had even watched as the women he knew fell in front of him, would be beaten to death without a care in the slightest. How could he say such explosive words? Xingfeng originally thought that Yuan Xing only treated Yiji differently. He thought that Yuan Xing would tell Yiji to wait for him for more than 10 years. He did not expect that the first thing he said would be to marry her. Cough. Xingfeng put his fist in front of his mouth and coughed lightly. He unnaturally pursed his lips into a secret smile. Yiji had always been timid. She was a puppet created by the mysterious person to deal with Yunjian. Even the heavens and earth did not approve of her existence. However, Yiji was caught off guard by Yuan Xing's sudden confession in front of everyone. Her wrist was tightly gripped by Yuan Ying. His eyes were fixed on her face, as if he was a python that would swallow her alive if she dared to refuse. Yiji shuddered. She turned to Yun Jian for help. Sister Yun Jian, follow your heart. If you're willing, we'll meet again in a decade or so. Yun Jian pressed her lips together and interrupted Yiji's words. Follow my heart. Yiji placed her other hand that was not held by Yuan Xing over her heart and closed her eyes. After meditating for a few minutes, Yiji finally opened her eyes and looked at Yun Jian. Sister Yun Jian, will I be able to see you again after I leave? Yes. Yun Jian nodded. Yiji had gone to the future, which meant that she had traveled more than 10 years to the future. Naturally, she would be able to meet the future Yun Jian. However, for Yun Jian and the others, they would have to wait for more than 10 years before they could meet the future Yiji. Once she heard that she would be able to see Yun Jian, Yiji agreed decisively. Alright, the dimensional door is about to disappear. If you don't leave now, it will be too late. Xing Feng used his spiritual power to sense and frowned. Hearing this, Yuan Jing grabbed Yiji's hand and walked into the space-time forest. Father, Mother, everyone, we will meet again in the future. Xing Feng revealed a handsome smile that was 80% similar to Si Yi's. He nodded towards everyone and then turned around to catch up with Yuan Xing's footsteps. After sending off Xing Feng, Yuan Xing and Yiji, Yun Jian returned to her normal life. But after that, Yun Jian still had a very important thing to do. 1 month later. The Qin family of Longmen City. Qin Sini had been locked up at home by her father for several days, especially today. To her, it was worse than death. Because this afternoon, Zhang Xiaofeng would be engaged to a rich young lady whom he had known for less than half a year. Zhang Xiaofeng's and Qin Sini's families found out about their relationship. A relationship between cousins was an intolerable act of incest. Qin Sini was impatient as she was locked up at home. Just as Qin Sini was about to smash her head in her anxiety, a sachet was thrown in through the window. Stunned, she quickly opened the sachet and took out its contents. When she saw the familiar words and the key in the sachet, Qin Sini was elated. It was her. It was Yun Jian. In a luxurious 5-star hotel in Longmen City, Zhang Xiaofeng was forced by his parents to change into the groom's attire for the engagement. The engagement party was in progress. Zhang Xiaofeng's father, dragged Zhang Xiaofeng to the center of the hotel and clinked glasses with the bride's father, Guohong. In-law, we're a family from now on. Please be more tolerant. Of course. Guohong smiled with squinted eyes and clinked glasses with Zhang Xiaofeng's father. Both of them looked at each other and drank. Zhang Xiaofeng rolled his eyes on the side. If his mother had not held a knife to his neck to force him to change, he would never have come here. Next to Guohong was a girl who was peeking at Zhang Xiaofeng shyly. She was about 18 years old and looked average. The girl's name was Gui Yaoding. She was Zhang Xiaofeng's fiancée. It was apparent that if it were not for the urgent need to cut off Zhang Xiaofeng and Qin Sini's relationship, Zhang Xiaofeng's father would not have asked Zhang Xiaofeng to get engaged in such a hurry. Cough cough. Thank you, dear friends and family, for coming today. Today is the engagement party of my son and the young lady of the Guo family, Gui Yaoding. Thank you for coming. Let the engagement ceremony begin. Zhang Xiaofeng's father spoke with squinted eyes. Just as he spoke, a clear and melodious female voice rang out. Hold on. This voice suddenly rang out, causing an uproar in the crowd. What was this? Was someone trying to snatch the bride like in television dramas? Everyone was stunned. Just as everyone was thinking about this, a figure suddenly jumped down from the second floor. This figure jumped down from the second floor. His action was so clean that it shocked everyone around him. Zhang Xiaofeng's eyes lit up when he saw this. Yun Jian, who suddenly stood in front of everyone, turned her head and looked at Zhang Xiaofeng, who was standing in front of the engagement ceremony. She gave Zhang Xiaofeng a contemptuous smile and said something that made everyone's heart skip a beat. Why didn't you invite your master to your engagement party? Come. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2685. These words sounded like a conversation between an ordinary person and an ordinary person, but the hearts of the people present jumped violently when they heard these words. She's fine after jumping down from the second floor just now. She even claimed to be the man's master. Who's this woman? Some guests who were invited to the scene could not help asking in shock when they saw Yun Jian leaping down from the second floor. Is this person a clown who's here to perform? Someone asked, but their eyes were glued to Yun Jian's face. She shouldn't be. How can a clown be so pretty? Someone retorted immediately. There was a flurry of comments. Guohong had only moved his company and assets to Longmen City a year ago. As Guohong's daughter and the person who was engaged to Zhang Xiaofeng today, Gui Yaoding had only come to Longmen City recently. She fell in love with Zhang Xiaofeng the moment she met him. She liked Zhang Xiaofeng's skills and drive that were different from other guys. Zhang Xiaofeng would train every day, including the skills he had learned from Yun Jian for so many years. His ability should be at least on par with a high-level assassin. It was about half a year ago that Gui Yaoding got to know Zhang Xiaofeng. It was a gathering and they were robbed on their way home in the middle of the night. It was a gathering of young men and women, but they were robbed by a group of armed robbers on their way home. Under normal circumstances, they had no other choice but to hand over their money obediently. The robbers that day were lustful when they saw that there were a few girls in the group. If they were ordinary people, they would have been robbed and raped that day. The girls were terrified. The boys' legs were wobbly from fear. It was then that Zhang Xiaofeng stood up. Not only did Zhang Xiaofeng stand up, he even took care of the robbers with his bare hands. They were sent to the police station and praised by the police. It was said that this group of criminals were habitual criminals, but because they were cunning and powerful and were armed with guns and knives, they were very difficult to catch. In the end, Zhang Xiaofeng managed to capture this group of criminals all by himself. From that day onwards, Gui Yaoding was attracted to Zhang Xiaofeng. Later, the relationship between Zhang Xiaofeng and her cousin, Qin Sini, was exposed. Although it was suppressed, Gui Yaoding still learned about it from various channels. And because Zhang Xiaofeng's parents wanted to completely cut off the relationship between Zhang Xiaofeng and Qin Sini, they began to arrange blind dates for Zhang Xiaofeng. They wanted Zhang Xiaofeng to get married as soon as possible so that he could completely cut off his relationship with Qin Sini. Gui Yaoding took advantage of the loophole to hold today's engagement party. Gui Yaoding frowned at the sudden appearance of a woman who was obviously here to make trouble and claimed to be Zhang Xiaofeng's master. Hey, it's Yun Jian. Zhang Xiaofeng, if you dare to let Sini down as Sini's good friend, my Yun Jian will be the first to not let you off. She's here to look for you. Although Ling Yichen was a playboy, he was also very optimistic about Qin Sini's happiness. In Ling Yichen's heart, he had already treated Qin Sini as his sister. Initially, when Zhang Xiaofeng got engaged to another woman, he was upset and frustrated just sitting by the side. The moment Yun Jian appeared, Ling Yichen stood up and spoke to Zhang Xiaofeng. However, these words sounded different to Gui Yaoding's ears. Gui Yaoding was wearing a gown. Just as Yun Jian was about to reach Zhang Xiaofeng, she stood in front of Yun Jian and acted like the hostess. She spoke to Yun Jian. You're Qin Sini's friend? I advise you not to cause trouble. If you're doing this for your friend's sake, please leave. Also, Xiaofeng doesn't have a master. You're not welcome here. Chapter 2686. Gui Yaoding said to Yun Jian word by word. Gui Yaoding completely disagreed with Yun Jian's claim that she was Zhang Xiaofeng's master. After all, ever since Gui Yaoding got to know Zhang Xiaofeng had always been training by himself. Those skills must have been learned by Zhang Xiaofeng himself. Moreover, even if he had a master, it definitely wouldn't be Qin Sini's friend. As for Yun Jian's claim that she was Zhang Xiaofeng's master, Gui Yaoding thought that Yun Jian, Qin Sini, Zhang Xiaofeng, and Ling Yichen must have gotten together when they were playing together. After all, in their youth, when students were bored in school, they would often call each other grandpa, grandma, big brother, and little brother. There were also people who called them master. As for Yun Jian, she was definitely one of those people who didn't have any actual skills. It was just a mutual term of address with Zhang Xiaofeng. Gui Yaoding's words to Yun Jian were very shrewish. After all, Gui Yaoding was also from a prestigious family, so she had to have some etiquette. F***ck. Ling Yichen grabbed a handful of his hair, looking like the emperor wasn't worried, but the eunuch was. Zhang Xiaofeng, if you get engaged with this woman today, I'll marry Sini in the future and leave with her. I'll never see you again. Ling Yichen was holding a glass of red wine. At this moment, he smashed the glass on the ground and shouted at Zhang Xiaofeng without a care for his dignity. Don't you dare. Zhang Xiaofeng panicked when he heard that Ling Yichen was going to take Qin Sini away. He shouted back. Seeing Zhang Xiaofeng's reaction, Gui Yaoding was displeased. At this moment, Yun Jian had already walked to a table in front of the engagement banquet. It was filled with all kinds of desserts and wine. She sat down at the table and crossed her legs. She casually poured herself a glass of red wine and looked at Zhang Xiaofeng. Mr. Zhang knew what Yun Jian was capable of. He ran downstairs and walked up to Yun Jian. He looked at Yun Jian with an anxious and embarrassed expression and hurriedly said, Miss Yun, the matter between my son and Cindy, could you please not interfere? His tone was extremely respectful. No. Yun Jian rejected him directly. With that, she picked up the glass of red wine, put it to her lips and took a sip. Bang. After Yun Jian tasted the red wine, she threw the glass and the red wine on the ground. The glass shattered and issued a heart-wrenching sound. Who are you? Uncle Zhang asked you to leave so politely. How could you treat Uncle Zhang like this? If you don't leave, I'm going to shout for help. Gui Yaoting grabbed her gown and walked down the stairs. She walked up to Yun Jian and glared at Yun Jian with her round eyes and threatened her loudly. But the moment Zhang Yaoting threatened Yun Jian loudly in front of everyone present, Yun Jian suddenly slid down from the table and stood on the ground. Seeing Yun Jian's move, Zhang Yaoting breathed a sigh of relief. She thought Yun Jian was afraid and wanted to compromise. But just as Zhang Yaoting thought so, Yun Jian hooked her right foot back. She suddenly turned 360 degrees, hooked a red wine bottle behind her and kicked it back. The red wine bottle hit the wall behind Zhang Xiaofeng in front of Zhang Yaoting and everyone present. The red wine bottle was smashed and the red wine inside poured out. At that speed, that distance, all the red wine poured out onto Zhang Xiaofeng's body. Chapter 2687. I'm the one who gave you your strength. Today I'm taking it back. The simple words that came out of Yun Jian's mouth shocked everyone present. Initially, everyone thought that Yun Jian was here to cause trouble. However, when Zhang Xiaofeng addressed Yun Jian as his master, Yun Jian kicked away the wine glass, and the words that came out of Yun Jian's mouth. The guests who were here to attend Zhang Xiaofeng and Gui Yaoting's engagement party were all stunned. Putting aside the fact that this teenage girl claimed to be Zhang Xiaofeng's master, the words that came out of her mouth were enough to shock everyone present. What right did she have to break Zhang Xiaofeng's meridians? Uncle Zhang, this girl is obviously here to cause trouble. She said that she wants to break Brother Xiaofeng's meridians. How is Brother Xiaofeng going to live his life in the future? Gui Yaoting was the first to react. She turned around and ran to Mr. Zhang, shouting loudly. Because she was running too fast, Gui Yaoting almost tripped over the gown she was wearing. Gui Yaoting's heart was now on Yun Jian's plan to hurt Zhang Xiaofeng. Father Zhang knew what Yun Jian was capable of. He did not ask someone to chase Yun Jian away like Gui Yaoting expected. Instead, his gaze dimmed as he walked slowly to Yun Jian and begged, I'm sorry. Miss Yun, please let Xiaofeng go. I can promise you anything else, but this was a mistake from the beginning. Xiaofeng and Cindy can never be together. Mr. Zhang walked to Yun Jian and spoke to Yun Jian in an extremely soft voice. When he said that, beads of sweat rolled down his forehead. It was obvious that he was afraid of Yun Jian. Boom. Just as Mr. Zhang said that, the sound of a beer bottle crashing to the ground was heard. It was Zhang Xiaofeng who picked up a beer bottle and smashed it to the ground. The noisy engagement banquet instantly fell silent. At this moment, Zhang Xiaofeng walked down the stairs slowly. As he walked, he tore off his suit jacket and threw it to the ground. Master, I didn't want to come to the engagement party today. As Zhang Xiaofeng spoke, he suddenly turned around and looked at his mother who was pressuring him. Mom, you heard it? Today, if you threaten me to marry Miss Guo with death again, I will ask Master to send me to my death. A life without Cindy is no different from hell. Zhang Xiaofeng's words were heard by everyone present. All the guests stood up when they heard his firm words. Tisk is just what the rumors. This is simply a family misfortune, incest. That's right. I thought that this lad was willing to be engaged to Miss Guo because he realized his mistake and changed. Who would have thought? TSK. The public opinion in the surroundings began to spread rapidly. Zhang Xiaofeng's expression did not change at all when he heard this. If I can't be with Xiaofeng, Chen Sini will go to hell with him. If we can't live together, we'll die together. Just as Zhang Xiaofeng finished speaking, a young lady walked out from the furthest corner of the room. The young girl gritted her teeth as she spoke, her tone filled with determination. It was none other than Chen Sini. Sini, you. Mr. Zhang's expression changed when he saw Chen Sini. Zhang Xiaofeng, Chen Sini will follow you for the rest of my life. I'll never leave you. Since we can't be together, we'll die together. Chen Sini grinned and walked toward Zhang Xiaofeng. What she said sounded normal. However, it took a lot of courage to say something like that. How many people in the world could do that? Impossible. Ridiculous. Even if the two of you ganged up to threaten me, I'll never agree to your ridiculous request. Mr. Zhang's heart ached. He clutched his chest and said loudly. Gui Yaoting panicked when Chen Sini appeared. She hated her even more. She looked anxiously at Zhang Xiaofeng and then at Qin Sini. She shouted at Qin Sini. You'll kill Xiaofeng. Do you really love Xiaofeng or not? I'm the one who's engaged to him. You're Xiaofeng's cousin. He's your cousin. It's incest for you to marry him. You'll be punished by the heavens. Gui Yaoting was scared. She was afraid that Zhang Xiaofeng would be snatched away by Qin Sini. Just as he finished his sentence, a beautiful female voice that had not been heard for a long time suddenly rang out. However, what she said stunned Mr. Zhang, all the guests, including Zhang Yaoting, Zhang Xiaofeng, and Qin Sini on the spot. Who told you that the two of them are blood-related cousins? Chapter 2688. Yun Jian's words were like an earth-shattering secret that stunned all the guests, including Gui Yaoting, her father, Guohong, and Zhang Jian's parents. Even Qin Sini's biological parents, Qin Jinchuan and He Xia, who had chased after Qin Sini to the engagement party, were stunned by Yun Jian's sudden words. Miss Yun, what are you talking about? I don't understand. Xiaofeng and Yaoting's engagement party is about to begin. Please don't spout nonsense at the engagement party. Otherwise, even if I'll have to kick you out of the party. Mr. Zhang was stunned when he heard Yun Jian's words. It was as if Yun Jian had discovered a secret that he had kept hidden for many years. He was at a loss as to what to do and started to chase the guests away. Dad. Before Mr. Zhang could finish, the first person to interrupt him was not Yun Jian, but Zhang Xiaofeng. Zhang Xiaofeng was glaring at Mr. Zhang with his bulging eyes. After yelling, he questioned Mr. Zhang in an almost doubtful tone. His voice trembled slightly. If one listened carefully, they would be able to detect a hint of ecstasy in his trembling voice. Tell me, is it true? Mr. Zhang was stunned when he was questioned by Zhang Xiaofeng. His eyes darted around as he tried to change the topic. Xiaofeng, how can you believe this? You should hurry up and complete the engagement ceremony with Miss Gua. Dad, I'll ask you one more time. Is what my master said true? I want you to say it. Yes, yes. Zhang Xiaofeng roared the last three words through gritted teeth. Yes. Mr. Zhang lowered his head after being yelled at by Zhang Xiaofeng, but he nodded in response. It's not worth it to kill two people who love each other and lose your son and daughter-in-law at the same time for the pride of a wealthy family. You'll regret it, Yun Jian suddenly said to Mr. Zhang when he lowered his head after being questioned by Zhang Xiaofeng. When he said this, Father Zhang's expression suddenly froze. He was not surprised that Yun Jian would say something like that. He was shocked that Yun Jian's words sounded so familiar. However, Yun Jian turned and walked out of the door as soon as Yun Jian finished her words. She would leave the rest to Zhang Xiaofeng. If he could not handle this well, then he deserved what would happen in the future. Yun Jian was right. She had been to the future world. In 2019, she heard about what would happen to Zhang Xiaofeng and Qin Sini in the future. The two of them were not biological cousins, but they were born in a wealthy family. People in wealthy families valued reputation very much. Therefore, even if Zhang Xiaofeng and Qin Sini were not cousins, they were not allowed to be together. Later, Zhang Xiaofeng and Qin Sini died for love. Mr. Zhang and Qin Sini's parents had always thought that the two children were just saying, "We can't live together, but we can die together." They did not expect that the two of them really did it. In the future, Mr. Zhang regretted it very much. He was condemned by his conscience every day and could not sleep. As for what happened later, Yun Jian did not care about it anymore. After seeing so many lives and deaths and dying for love, Yun Jian only wanted to do one thing now. And that was, in the villa. Xi was reading in the study. The two children had just been coaxed to sleep by Qin Yiru. He had just finished reading an entire book about weapons when the door of the study was opened. When he saw Yun Jian wearing a heavy coat that looked like a dumpling, Xi instinctively thought that he would not be able to eat meat tonight. Just now. But just as Xi was about to ask, his expression suddenly changed and his eyes suddenly became sharp. When Yun Jian took off the long and thick coat that was as cumbersome as a dumpling in front of him, Yun Jian's eyes widened in shock. Inside, she was only wearing a pair of underwear that could barely cover her seductive parts. I want you. Come. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2689. Yun Jian's words had completely fueled Si Yi's ambition. Si Yi was stunned when he heard Yun Jian's words. In the next second, he did not even bother to go around the desk in the study. Getting up, he stepped over the desk and came to Yun Jian's side in just 3 seconds. Wrapping his arms around the exposed girl, he lowered his head and pinched the little mouth that captivated him. Yun Jian could not help lifting her head from the kiss and closing her eyes. Si Yi pressed Yun Jian against the wall. As they kissed, He pushed away the miscellaneous items on the desk and their lips were inseparable from each other. The stars at night were beautiful, reflecting the sky outside the window as they twinkled. The two stars were slowly coming together, intertwining intimately and seamlessly, creating a beautiful symphony. Just like the two people in the room, they were already lost in their mutual pleasure and could not find themselves. They only had each other in their eyes. Yun Jian was not there, so she did not know what happened to Chen Sini and Zhang Xiaofeng after that. She only knew that both of them overcame all sorts of difficulties and got together. Ling Yichen also stopped being a playboy and started dating wholeheartedly. Time passed quickly and almost a year had passed in the blink of an eye. It was worth mentioning that Zhang Xiaofeng and Chen Sini had completely resisted the elders in their family. Not long after they got together, Si Luo became pregnant. Needless to say, Si Luo's child was a boy, Yuan Jin. However, Yun Jian had never mentioned this to Si Luo, so Si Luo was very curious about the gender of her child and kept asking about it every day. Yun Jian only smiled without saying anything. It was the 31st of March 2005. It was the eve of Yun Jian and Si Yi's wedding. Yun Jian took the number 57 bus alone from the city center of Longmen City to the cemetery in the city. Lu Shiyun's parents often went out and rarely returned home. In addition, although Lu Shiyun's parents had not completed the divorce procedures, the two of them had been living separately for many years and had their own children and new homes. To them, Lu Shiyun was just an existence that was dispensable. Therefore, even though Lu Shiyun had passed away, no one came to visit him at the cemetery. In the future world, Lu Shiyun's parents had passed away, and Lu Shiyun was heartbroken. Lu Shiyun's parents died in a car accident because the two of them finally got the chance to go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get a divorce. Therefore they rushed there without stopping. Lu Shiyun's father was also a soldier. A military marriage could not be easily divorced. On that day in the future, Lu Shiyun's mood was already very complicated. Coupled with Xiang Weilan's betrayal, Lu Shiyun's mood dropped to the bottom. Everyone had a bottom line. Once their bottom line was crossed, they would go berserk. Lu Shiyun's future was indeed tragic, but he was not alone. Just as Yun Jian arrived at the cemetery, she saw the former Team Monarch members clearing the weeds around Lu Shiyun's grave. Yun Jian. Chu Xiangnan nodded in greeting when he saw Yun Jian. Yun Jian nodded in response. Taking out incense and candles to pay respects to Lu Shiyun solemnly in front of the grave, Yun Jian was about to leave quietly. Is Team Monarch really disbanded just like that? Chu Ning suddenly asked without calling out Yun Jian's name when Yun Jian walked down the mountain. There was an imperceptible desolation in her words. Team Monarch no longer had Lu Shiyun. Everything in the past had become history. Yun Jian paused, unable to say the word. When Yun Jian walked down the mountain, Chu Ning did not give up and asked Yun Jian again. Perhaps she just wanted to hear Yun Jian admit to the fact that their team leader, Lu Shiyun, had really passed away. Is Team Monarch really disbanded just like that? This time, Chu Ning's question was met with a soft reply from Yun Jian. Chu Ning was sobbing. She cried that Team Monarch's disbandment and Lu Shiyun's death were a foregone conclusion. Come. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2690. Everything that had happened was like a dream that they could not wake up from. Chu Ning, Chu Xiangnan, everyone in Team Monarch wanted to stay in that dream forever. Sometimes, however, reality was cruel. It would tell you that when you woke up from the dream, everything that had happened in the past would be forever frozen in memories and illusions. Early the next morning, Yun Jian was dragged out of bed by Qin Yiru at 3 in the morning. She had not seen Si Yi for a week. According to Longmen City's customs, Yun Jian and Si Yi were not allowed to see each other on the eve of their wedding. The longer they could not see each other, the better. When others got married, the bride and groom were not allowed to see each other for a whole month. Si Yi could not help it. 7 days, a whole week without seeing Yun Jian was his limit. She woke up at 3 in the morning, showered, brushed her teeth, cleaned her face and changed into her wedding clothes. At 4 in the morning, she was dragged to the front hall to put on makeup. It took her 3 hours to put on her makeup. Yun Jian fell asleep 3 times in the middle of the process. In spite of it, the effect of the makeup was excellent. Coupled with Yun Jian's perfectly straight and slender figure, no one could tell that she was the mother of 2 children. April 1, 2005 was Yun Jian's 20th birthday. Everyone who had just arrived on this day. To celebrate the wedding, Si Yi announced that all restaurants in the world would be open to the public for 10 days for free. He would pay for all the expenses. For the 10 days, the world was enveloped in a joyous atmosphere. Every restaurant that made a profit had the words Happy Marriage to Madame Yun Jian and Mr. C written on their doors. Ce married Yun Jian and brought her home amidst the hustle and bustle. The wedding was held in a church. Everyone was present. It was definitely an unprecedented wedding. The higher-ups of an Hun group, the elders of kosher mercenaries, the leader of Blood Doll, the CEO of Rongyao Company, and so on. Everyone came to congratulate them. Even the priest in the church was frightened by this scene. It was said that some of the international underworld bosses would have a very grand wedding. The priest was also an experienced and knowledgeable person. He had seen many things. But the priest had never seen this wedding. Other than Yun Jian and Si Yi's subordinates, everyone who was slightly famous internationally had agreed to attend the wedding. Regardless of the size of the underworld gangs, even the major assassin organizations were mobilized one after another. Those who didn't know would think that they were going to do something together. At this moment, the priest was standing at the top of the church. He cleared his throat, and after the ceremony he asked Ce in front of everyone, "Now, let's invite the groom to express his thoughts. May I ask what the groom wants to do now?" When Ce heard this, he didn't even look at the priest. He just held Yun Jian's small hand with one hand and curled his lips. He didn't even think before saying, 10 days and 10 nights. The priest didn't hear clearly, but in order to maintain order, the priest cleared his throat and asked Yun Jian the same question. "So our groom wants to kiss our bride. Then what about the bride? If you were given a chance, what would be the one thing you want to do the most?" He thought that Yun Jian's reply would be more shy and bashful, but who would have thought that Yun Jian would say so openly in front of everyone, "I want to do things with the person I love." Chapter 2691. "Oh, so our bride wants to have sex with the groom?" The priest held up a book with one hand while his other hand floated in the air, pointing here and there. He habitually repeated what Yun Jian had just said. However, when the priest spoke up to this point, he suddenly paused. Why was this sentence so explicit? Cough, cough, cough. "It seems that our bride and groom are very loving, so now the most exciting moment has arrived. The groom can kiss you." The priest was indeed experienced and knowledgeable. After he realized that the sentence was explicit, he used words to turn it around. People in Western countries were more direct, unlike Z country, where things like kissing were usually done by couples hiding in small rooms. Of course, many couples who pursued fashion would choose to get married in a Western wedding ceremony. Yun Jian and Ce chose to get married in a Western wedding ceremony, which meant that Ce kissing Yun Jian in public was a very normal ceremony. Without waiting for the priest to finish saying, "The groom can kiss your bride," Ce had already bent down and kissed Yun Jian hard on the lips in front of everyone. He was swearing to the whole world that the woman in front of him would forever be his private property. Okay. The priest saw that Ce had taken the initiative to kiss Yun Jian's lips without waiting for him to finish speaking. 3 black lines flashed across his eyes, and he helplessly cooperated with him silently. After he finished speaking, the priest could not help but whisper softly, and described it in Z country's language, "Actually, you can enter the bridal chamber now." So impatient. Seriously. What the priest did not know was that Ce was indeed impatient. He had not seen Yun Jian for a week. Such an unbearable rule could only be comforted by being in bed with Yun Jian for 10 days and 10 nights. On the day of the wedding, everyone from Yulong mainland, Gun Yanji, Li Nong, Huang Yan, the King of Gods, and Bei Li Yan were present. However, on the second day of the wedding, the King of Gods took Bei Li Yan to explore the boundless world of Earth. He only left a letter with 5 big words written on it: "I, old son, am leaving." The main reason why the Lord God wrote the letter in such a tone was because he had recently watched too many classic television dramas filmed on Earth, such as Journey to the West and Monkey King. Although the overgod still looked like a young man in his 20s on the outside, his heart was as childish as a child's. After the wedding, Yun Jian and Ce disappeared for 10 days. On the 10th day, when everyone saw Yun Jian, she could barely get out of bed. However, 1 month after the wedding, Yun Jian and Ce suddenly disappeared. No matter how hard the kosher mercenaries and an Hun organization searched, they could not find a single trace of them. Yulunber grassland. The grassland stretched as far as the eye could see, and there was no one around. Because the grassland covered a large area, even if there were people, they wouldn't be able to see each other from 10 miles away. Somewhere in the grassland, a cozy tent was set up. Ce hugged Yun Jian as they sat on the green grassland where the air was fresh. Ring, ring, ring. There's a call, there's a call. The childish ringtone that the little guy had inadvertently set rang. Yun Jian recalled that today was the 15th day since they went missing a month after their wedding. Thinking that she and Ce had been missing for too long and would be worried, Yun Jian reached for the phone. Ignore it. It's just a bunch of eyesores. Ce kicked the phone away. In the next second, his gaze on Yun Jian was no longer pure. His burning gaze looked like he wanted to swallow Yun Jian whole. Xiao Jian, give me another child, Ce's burning gaze was fixed on Yun Jian. In the next second he wrapped his arms around Yun Jian's arms and hooked his legs around Yun Jian's slender legs as well, bringing Yun Jian into the tent for another round of lovemaking. The sky was the blanket and the ground was the bed. It was great that there was no one in the wilderness within 100 miles. Next time when he went back he should give the girl and the little guy a litter of wolf pups. That would be great. With that in mind, Ce worked harder, gentler, too fast. The author has something to say. This is the ending of the main text. I'll write more side stories. The main text isn't comprehensive, but I'll try my best to fill in all the loopholes in the side stories. Thank you for your love along the way. I'm very, very touched. This book is the one that I've spent the most effort on. I'll make sure it ends the side stories in the most perfect situation. The side stories will be done in about 3 to 4 months. You can choose your favorite couple or plot to read the side stories. Love you guys. Also, the female lead of the new book is Killer and Grim reborn on campus. She's still pretentious, face-slapping, scumbag bullying and pampering. The book will be published on July 11, 2019, which is this year's summer break. You can add me on QQ for details. I'll post the release date in QZone. A certain author's QQ is 2625702229. The reason why it's taking so long is because I want to finish the side stories and prepare for the new book. Come. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2692. July 11, 1987. Southeast Asia, Myanmar. In the market, many people were selling all kinds of goods and shouting in their own country's language to the passers-by. Myanmar was not a rich country. At the corner of the market, after turning countless corners, there was no one in the dark. 20 to 30 Burmese men in tattered clothes were sitting on the ground in various postures. This group of people, without exception, were all street gangsters. They could not afford to live in a house and would even do something against their conscience for a mouthful of food. Ta. At this time, a thin and lean man ran out from the dark. Brothers, there's work to be done. Someone in the underworld is buying children at a high price. It's a little risky and the price is very high. Do you want to do it? As soon as they heard that there was work to be done, the group of men who were sitting in the corners and even sitting on the smelly gutters all stood up. They didn't mind being dirty at all. We can't even fill our stomachs. If we're late, we'll starve to death. Not to mention the risk, even if someone puts a gun on our head, we'll do it if we have money. Z country, on the busy streets, occasionally passing by the downtown area, one could hear such a beautiful female announcer's voice coming from the loudspeaker. Hello everyone, I'm Xiao, an announcer from the radio and television station. Recently there have been several cases of children going missing in Z country. I hope that all the parents will take good care of their children and don't let them stay alone in unsupervised places. On the edge of M country, an archipelago. A group of 5 to 7 years old children were escorted to this island. Looking at the number of people, there were 50 of them. The children were escorted to this archipelago, looking around. Some were scared, some were crying, and some were silent. The group of children was escorted by the 20 to 30 Burmese men. This group of Burmese men handed over to the person in charge of the archipelago, took the money and left. When they left, they turned around and looked at the group of children, revealing a big smile. Little babies, uncle will send you here. After saying this, the Burmese man laughed and walked away happily with another group of Burmese men. The 50 children who were brought to the archipelago all howled and cried, shouting, Mommy. I want mommy. I want to go home. Daddy, grandma, where are you? Where is this place? Woo. Fear, panic, screams and wails. The wails of 50 children less than 10 years old resounded throughout the entire area. The entire island was filled with the cries of children. However, in the crowd, there was a 5-year-old girl who stood in stark contrast to the group of crying children. The little girl was delicate and beautiful. She had a pair of sharp and deep eyes. Her eyelashes were long and narrow, and when they fluttered up and down, it made people's hearts melt. She shut her mouth and didn't cry or make a fuss. She wasn't afraid or panicked. She just stared at the 20 to 30 Burmese men who had deceived and kidnapped them to the archipelago, to this hellish and cruel island. Wah, mother. I want mommy. A child next to her cried and accidentally bumped into the little girl's body, but the little girl didn't seem to feel anything. She just stood there and stared at the 20 to 30 Burmese men who were hugging and cheering each other as they left with the rewards. She memorized the faces of the 20 to 30 Burmese men who had kidnapped them to the archipelago without missing a single one. The author has something to say, starting to update the story. The first part of the story is about how the female lead and Shinji grew up in the assassin organization. Moi love you all. Chapter 2693. The little girl stared at the 20 to 30 Burmese men who were hugging each other as they left, until they disappeared in front of her. Other than the little girl, the rest of the children just kept crying non-stop. Some of the children were fine. They just stood there and looked up to the sky, crying and howling. Usually, in an unfamiliar place, the disobedient children were like a group of tadpoles looking for their mother. As long as they were placed in a spacious place, they would run everywhere. The 50 children, both boys and girls, were like tadpoles looking for their mother. They ran wildly in all directions. As they ran, they looked up to the sky and screamed like headless flies. One of the children who ran the fastest had already reached the shore of the island and was rushing madly into the sea with the seawater. I want to find my mother. Take me home. I want to find my father. Wah wah wah. Wah wah wah. Bang, bang, bang. The child cried as he ran. When he reached the surface of the sea, 3 gunshots suddenly rang out. The 3 gunshots hit the head, heart, and thigh of the child running towards the sea. A second later, the child suddenly stopped breathing and fell to the ground. Although the children were still young and didn't know what death was, when they saw this scene, all the children instinctively stopped and shut their mouths. Clap, clap, clap. At this time, applause came from the side. The person in charge of the island who was talking to the 20 to 30 Burmese men smiled and walked to the center of the group of children. What a group of cute children. The person in charge laughed and then lowered his head slightly. He looked at the group of children and suddenly said, "Let's get to know each other. I'm Jay, you can call me by my name, Jay." Jay was the name of the person in charge. The group of children huddled together and blinked, not understanding their current situation. Jay, don't scare the children. A tall man with a full beard came from the side. He looked like a Westerner. Jay laughed and retreated to the side. The bearded man walked in front of all the children and suddenly stretched out his arms and made a welcoming gesture. Welcome to an Hun organization. I'm your instructor, you can call me Jikala. After Jikala finished speaking, he suddenly clapped his hands. Immediately, someone passed a number tag to Jikila. Jack Law waved the number plate in his hand. Now let's play a game. I have number plates from 1 to 50. The number plate you get will be your name. After Jikila finished speaking, he ordered his men to distribute the number tags. Seeing that all the children were seriously looking at the number plate in his hand, Jack Law narrowed his eyes. Jack Law, what are you doing? Jay walked up to Jack Law and grinned fiercely. Brother, I'm helping you. Jack patted Jay's shoulder and whispered in Jay's ear, don't worry, I'm not going to give you a chance. The children have just arrived, so of course we have to hold a welcoming ceremony. The real game will only begin tomorrow. After that, Jack Law patted Jay's shoulder again and walked away with a smile. The little girl, who had come to an unfamiliar place with a group of children, was the opposite of the other children. She didn't cry or make a fuss. She took the number plate and glanced at it. The number plate was very simple. It was made of very ordinary material. The little girl glanced at the number plate and saw the number that represented her name. 006. Come. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2694. A group of children, regardless of gender, were taken into a large venue. The venue was only covered by a simple shade. On the large venue there were many double beds. The double bed was a bunk bed. The bed was not strong and people stood on it and swayed. After a group of children were arranged here, they quickly chose their beds. 006 stood in place without saying a word. He waited for everyone to choose their own beds before he walked over to a remote upper bunk that no one had chosen and slept. Tick tick tick. At night, the only clock hanging in this simple residence was turning. All the children slept soundly. The next day before 4 o'clock, before dawn, a group of children were forced to get up. It was Instructor Chekla, holding a thick whip in his hand, who ran in the end and whipped the children who couldn't run fast. Early in the morning, the screams of the children spread throughout the island. But no one paid attention. The children didn't even know why they were being whipped. They ran in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening. In this way half a month passed. Some children who ran slowly were covered with injuries all over their bodies. No one treated them. Some children were so tired that they couldn't run anymore. Because they were whipped, they got up from the ground and continued to move forward. In a month, nearly 10 of the 50 children died. The children found that as long as someone in the crowd didn't move, they would be pulled out, and the child would never come back here. Tonight, I'm going to play a little game with you. Chekla picked his nose, laughed twice, and suddenly spoke. Go back, all of you. Jay waved after Chekla said this. As soon as the children rushed back to the nest. All the children were in groups of 2 or 3. Only one child slept in a bed in the corner. 006 was alone, had no friends and didn't speak. What game will Instructor Chekla play with us in the evening? A little girl asked her playmate. I don't know. If we perform well, we should have meat to eat at night. The little girl's playmate said to her. With that, the little girl's playmate suddenly glanced at 006, and then said to the little girl, she doesn't have any friends. Is she sick? My mother said that sick children can't find friends. Hearing her playmate's words, the little girl nodded. I think so. Then should we play with her? No need. He'll spread the disease to us. 006 sat on the bed and heard the conversation between the two little girls clearly. At this moment, the door was opened, and a group of people led the children sitting on the bed out of the door. In the empty space, a large iron cage appeared in the air. The people outside the cage could clearly see what was happening inside the cage. Chekla was sitting on a high bench, leaning back and squinting at the cage. At this time, the numbers 001 and 002 were brought into the iron cage. Little friends, let's play a little game. Whoever is good at the game will have meat to eat tonight. Jack Law put his hands on the seat and leaned forward. He narrowed his eyes and looked at 001 and 002 who were brought into the iron cage. The rules of the game are very simple. Gekla spoke again. As he spoke, he licked his lips with his tongue. Immediately, Gekla's men took 2 daggers and handed the 2 daggers to 001 and 002 who were locked in the iron cage. At this time, Gekla leaned back and suddenly said the rules of the game. Hold the knives in your hands and stab the person standing in front of you to death, just like how I showed you how to stab the big wolf dog this afternoon, okay? If you stab the people standing opposite you to death, you will have meat to eat tonight. Come. Wonderful book house. Come. Chapter 2695. Eating meat was definitely a very attractive thing for children. Even if the children didn't know what death was as a human, they still had a faint understanding of death. If I stab her to death, then she won't play with me and sleep with me anymore. 001 asked Jack Keela as he clutched the dagger in his hand, trembling as he looked at 002 in front of him. Playing with you and sleeping with you is boring. As long as you stab her to death, you will have meat to eat, and you can also see your father and mother. Jikara curled his lips, he smiled coldly and moved back slightly. But 001 was still hesitating. 002 had already stabbed 001's body with the dagger, and his mouth made a trembling cry. I want to eat meat, I want father and mother, I want to eat meat. 002 stabbed 001's body with the dagger, and was so scared that he sat down on the ground, and his mouth kept repeating this sentence. Clap, clap, clap. Jikara clapped his hands, squinted his eyes and said, Great. Good job. After Jikara's words, someone immediately dragged 001's body out of the iron cage. 002 was brought out. The next opponents were not in the order of the number plates. But the next children either cried or screamed, but in the end they were all forced to kill their opponents. When 006 stepped into the big iron cage, Jikara's eyes suddenly narrowed deeply. When this group of children first came to the island, he didn't forget that this little girl in a group of children didn't cry or make a fuss, and was very quiet and very special. Jikara narrowed his eyes, and just as he was about to speak, he saw 006 turn around, and before he could announce the start, he stabbed the little girl who followed him into the cage. Jikara saw this and sat up straight. The previous group of children were forced to cry and stab the opponent's body. But this child, I haven't said start yet and you started the game. Jikara said, squinting at 006, and then continued to say, Are you not afraid of breaking the rules of our game? Will I die if I break the rules? 006, who had been silent, suddenly asked such a question. I won't die. Being questioned by a 5-year-old child, Jack Law was stunned. He was surprised at the child's IQ. 006 just looked at Gekila and walked out of the iron cage. Ah! Gekla laughed out loud. In the one-on-one battle, the 50 children were instantly reduced by half, leaving only 25. 006 is still a man of few words in a group. 3 months later, a new batch of children was sent to Anhun. This new batch of children who were sent to Anhun group repeated the training method of 006 batch of children. The days passed by quickly. In the blink of an eye, the group of half-grown children had all grown up by a year. During this period of time, nothing happened. The iron cage fight a year ago was held by this group of crazy people to eliminate the useless weaklings. Survival of the fittest and elimination of the weak. Those children who did not dare to raise their daggers from the beginning should be eliminated from the very beginning, for no reason at all. A year later, 006 had just turned 6 years old. On this day, 006 sat on her bed with her eyes closed. Bang! She heard someone kick the lower bunk under her bed. She opened her eyes and looked down. She saw an 8 or 9-year-old little girl with her hands on her waist, looking at Yun Jian with murderous eyes. Get down here. I've taken a fancy to this bed. It's mine. 006's eyes moved, looking at the number tag on the little girl's chest, only to see a number written on it that she would never forget for the rest of her life. 095. P.S. I'll write about all the supporting characters, CP and so on. Everyone can add me on QQ and tell me if there's any other story you want to see. I'll write it. Everyone can also see the story you like. The title clearly states that I love you all. My QQ, 2625702229. Come. Wonderful book house. Come. Chapter 2696. What are you looking at? 006, right? Come down and fight if you don't like it. 095 saw 006 poking her head out from the upper bunk bed to look at her. She puffed out her small chest even more arrogantly, looking like a little adult. After staying in this cruel world for a year, 006 had seen all kinds of scenes. She pressed her hand on the railing of the upper bunk bed, and her small figure directly jumped down from the upper bunk bed. The moment she jumped down from the upper bunk bed, 006 kicked 095 horizontally. After staying in the Anhun organization for a year, more than 30 of the 50 children died. Although a new batch came in later, no one could guarantee that they would live to see tomorrow in this place where only the fittest survived. Death here was the most normal thing. Seeing this, 095's pupils flashed slightly. She dodged to the side and learned the technique that the instructor taught her 2 days ago. Her hand arched like an eagle's claw, and the technique was not mature enough to grab 006's neck. 006's hand slapped 095's eagle claw away. She kicked 095's chin and suddenly kicked 095 to the ground. But 095 quickly turned over and stood up. The cruel one-on-one fight a year ago had eliminated all the weak who didn't even dare to hold a knife. This was a place where only the fittest survived. No one would sympathize with you. Even if you were killed by your companions here, no one would care. At most, the body would be dragged out of the room and thrown out casually. 095 stood up, and shock appeared on her childish face. You actually defeated me? 095 clenched her fist and shouted. Loser. 006 glanced at 095 and walked to her bed. 006, I remember you. I will definitely defeat you. 095 looked at 006's figure and suddenly shouted out in the next second. She had never failed to challenge anyone in 095. Never. But only here she met her opponent. She was not reconciled. At night it was quiet all around. Except for the sound of the children who were abducted into the organization sleeping, there was nothing else. 006 was not asleep yet. Suddenly there was a rustling sound in her ear, followed by the sound of someone rolling from under the bed to 006's upper bunk bed. 006 opened her eyes. She saw a 7 or 8-year-old girl taking out a steamed bun from her bosom and stuffing it into her hand. For you. After the little girl finished speaking, she shyly turned around and climbed down the bed. Since 006 entered the organization, she has been quiet. A 5-year-old girl knows where she is better than anyone else. Since a year ago, this little girl had been secretly giving 006 some delicious food in the middle of the night. She would often turn around and run away with a red face after giving 006 some delicious food. 006 never said a word to her. Today, for some reason, 006 opened his mouth. His voice was still childlike, but it was pleasant to listen to. What's your name? My. After writing this letter, the little girl ran away. In the following days, the little girl named MY still came to 006 every day to give her steamed bun, sometimes cornbread, but from this day on, the little girl would tell 006 some stories that made her laugh. Whether 006 listened to her story or not, the little girl arrived on time. Sometimes 006 sat on the bed holding her knees. The little girl thought she was afraid and would hold her every day and tell her, "We have to be good, we will be able to go home." In this way another month passed. One day the little girl picked up a white stone from nowhere. The front of the white stone was engraved with the letter MY and the back of the stone was engraved with SS. She said to 006, "My is me, SS is you, it will bless us and take us home, I must take good care of it so we can go home." Well, 006 listened and didn't react much. But this sentence, 006 has remembered all his life. The children who can survive this year of fighting are not weak. 006 is powerful but she can win one-on-one, but one against many. 006 is still a child after all. The children here are very precocious. After living here for a year they all understand a survival king. Which child's strength is particularly outstanding in one-on-one fighting, then it will certainly constitute a threat to their survival. Just like the one-on-one fighting, if they meet 006 they are finished. So on this day, a group of children gathered together and came up with a way to deal with 006. Are we too bad to do this? Mom said we can't be bad children. If we don't kill her we will die. If we die how can we find our mom? How can we go home? 006 is too strong, we get rid of her. Come. Wonderful book house. Come. Chapter 2697. On this day, 095 stayed in an empty room, and a group of 5 or 7 years old girls walked up to her. The oldest of them was 12 years old. The plan this time was organized by the oldest girl. 095, do you want to win against 006? The oldest girl led a group of people to surround 095 and asked. Of course. 095 slapped the bed and stood up angrily. Then let's kill her together. The oldest girl smiled viciously. 095 listened to the little girl's words and decisively refused. No. I want to rely on my own strength. Against 006. You don't know what's good for you, Humph. The oldest girl in the lead crossed her arms in front of her chest. Now she snorted coldly at 095, turned around and left with a group of girls surrounding 095. The group of little girls were well prepared to deal with 006. Who knew that at that time, 006 was called out by the Jikra instructor. In a small lawn of the organization. Taking advantage of the instructor's absence, the little girl MY who brought 006 delicious food every day and told her that we would find the way home, was sitting on the lawn with a little boy. The little boy put a flower on MY. She lowered her head shyly. The little boy code 056. The little girl who called herself MY code 018. 056 and 018 have a good relationship, which is known to all. I'll go first. I'll go to the cafeteria to see if there's anything delicious. 018 stood up, showed a sweet smile to the little boy, turned around and ran away. As soon as she arrived at the cafeteria, as usual, 018 avoided everyone and sneaked into the cafeteria to steal tonight's supper for 006. But 018 just secretly took a steamed bun in the cafeteria, turned around and was surrounded by a group of people. The leader was the oldest girl who tried to deal with 006 with 095. Hey look, see what you stole? The oldest girl said and walked toward 018 step by step. Boom, rumble. At night, the sound of thunder was very loud and the sky seemed to be torn apart. 006 sat on his bed, but 018 never came. What came was her nemesis 095. Someone wants to deal with you. 095 just walked past 006 and said this sentence in a contemptuous tone. After that, 095 left. After 2 steps, 095 turned to look at 006 and said, "Don't die." 006's eyes at 095's words fell, suddenly flashed. Boom. At this moment, a thunderbolt flashed by the window. 006 suddenly turned over from the bed, landed, people ran out. 006 did find 018. But when she found 018, what she saw was this scene. The rain fell to the ground and formed a river. 018's body had already been torn apart. 018's limbs had been dismembered and his heart had been dug out. His body was exposed and soaked in the rain, allowing the crazy storm to pour down on him. 006's heart suddenly contracted at this moment. After being in the organization for a year, she was used to seeing life and death. But at this moment, an unknown pain welled up in her heart. The girl who would give her snacks at night, the girl who would hug her and tell her that we will find our way home, the girl who would speak softly, she would never appear again. In 018's hand, there was still a piece of white stone in it. The letters engraved on the front of the white stone gradually became clear under the impact of the rain. The word MY was engraved on it. 006 seemed to have heard that night, and 018's words still lingered in his ears for a long time. It will hold us and take us home. I must take good care of it so that we can go home. But before returning home, 018 was lying on the cold ground, never speaking again, never hugging her, comforting her, and telling her that, we will definitely go home. Come. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2698. Soon, someone organized people to drag away the body of 018 and feed it to the big wolf dog. After the people here died, their bodies would be dragged away and fed to the big wolf dog. This was the organization telling them that if they didn't want to be dragged away and fed to the big wolf dog after death, they had to survive in the strongest way. Even if you don't hesitate to kill your most important friend. At all costs. 006 was silent for many days. At the age of 6, she didn't know what death meant. She only knew that 018 would never appear again. No one would bring her food in the middle of the night and hug her with their warm arms. 6 years later. 006 was 12 years old. The group of people who killed 018 was killed by the boy 056 who often met 018. 006 later learned that 056's code name was Mad Dragon. After 018's death, 006's strength advanced by leaps and bounds. She could learn the most accurate killing move in the fastest time and could kill the opponent in the fastest time. Every year, a new batch of children would enter the organization, and then the first batch of children who were still alive would play the survival of the fittest game with the new children. Today, out of the thousands of children, there were only 50 who survived. And 006 was one of them. Today will be your big day. If you want to go home, your wish will be fulfilled today. Jay looked at the 50 people who had eliminated all the weak and survived over the years with his hands behind his back, squinted and smiled. After laughing, Jay clapped his hands in the excited voice of the group of people. Immediately, someone took the remaining 50 people and sent them into a large iron cage. Well, children, you can choose any weapon in front of you. After you get the weapon, you can use the weapon in your hand to kill anyone you see. Because in this game, only 3 people can survive to the end. Jay's words floated into the ears of the 50 people who walked into the iron cage. Large-scale battle. 50 people holding the weapons in their hands, kill anyone they see. Until the last 3 people who survive can walk out of the island. This was a game, and at the same time, it was a struggle between life and death. They might be able to survive in the organization for a few years, but whether they can reach the end depends on today's decisive battle. What? Only 3 people can survive? Doesn't that mean we have no way to survive? Hearing Jay's words, some people's expressions changed. They looked at Jay and voiced their dissatisfaction. This isn't fair. I have no friends. They formed cliques. If you gang up on me with your friends, then I'm dead for sure. Someone immediately voiced out his complaint. Jay listened attentively to everyone's complaints. Then he smiled innocently. Unfair? Are you complaining? As soon as Jay said this, his face suddenly turned sinister, then he laughed sinisterly. Those who don't have weapons can die now. As soon as Jay finished speaking, 30 snipers immediately appeared in the air. 30 snipers aimed their sniper rifles at the 50 people in the large iron cage from different angles. As long as they did not obey, they would die. Just as most of the 50 people in the cage were grumbling, 006 went to the pile of weapons and chose a butterfly knife. He turned around and sprinted forward 2 steps. He swung the butterfly knife and stabbed 3 hesitant companions to death. Blood splattered everywhere. 095 also quickly grabbed a long knife from the pile of weapons and joined the battle of life and death. This battle was a competition of speed. It was about survival. Whoever was slower by a second would die. While the other group of people were dawdling, complaining about the unfairness, or whispering to each other to discuss how to deal with the enemy together, 006 had already picked up the butterfly knife and killed a bunch of his companions. In this battle of life and death where there was no process, only the results mattered. Only those who were fast, accurate, and ruthless would have the chance to live to the end. When the large iron cage was surrounded by corpses and only 3 people were left standing on the pile of corpses with their weapons in hand, Jay reached out his hand and clapped. He said to the 3 of them, "Congratulations on becoming the last king and joining in Hun Group. Tomorrow someone will send you to sign a 5-year contract. After 5 years of service to the group, you will regain your freedom." Southeast Asia, Myanmar. The group of people who sent a group of children into the group received a large sum of wealth and spent their days and nights with beautiful women. At this moment in a large bar. Brothers, have you heard? An Hun group recently sent out 3 assassins. Their strength is amazing and they defeated a large number of international bigwigs. Do you think the group of children we sent in is one of them? How could it be so coincidental? Hey. What if there is? What if they come to seek revenge on us? How is that possible? How old are those children? They don't even remember our faces. This joke is not funny at all. In the bar, a short and fat Burmese man was holding a beautiful woman's breasts with a look of indifference. But just as they finished speaking, the door was suddenly opened. They saw a 12-year-old girl with loose hair and a dark aura all over her body appear in front of them. Where did this little girl come from? Go, go, go. Get out. The Burmese man looked at her with disdain. But as soon as he finished speaking, a butterfly knife suddenly flew out of the girl's hand and directly cut off the Burmese man's head. She stepped forward in a second and stepped on the Burmese man's head with one foot. She kicked the butterfly knife from the ground with the other foot and held it in her hand. She looked up with a pair of sharp eyes that reflected a murderous intent. It was so cold that all the Burmese men present were suddenly frightened. An Hun Group's special agent, slaying God. One of the children sent to the organization 7 years ago. It's time for all of you to go to hell. Come. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2699. As soon as Slaying God finished speaking, the men sitting in the private room of the bar screamed in panic when they saw Slaying God enter and behead one of their buddies. They were holding a beauty in their left arm and another in their right arm respectively. What? You're still alive. Why you're still alive? The group of Burmese men were so frightened that they threw the beauties in their arms in front of Slaying God. A few of them were so frightened that they stepped on the seats and jumped back and forth. Slaying God was blocking the entrance so they could not walk out of the room and were afraid of being assassinated. Knock, knock, knock. Someone knocked on the door of the private room. The person who knocked had no idea what was going on in the private room. She opened the door and spoke in a gentle voice. Hello, everyone. Hello, gentlemen. I'm waiter number 39. I'm here to deliver the drinks you ordered just now. Just as she spoke, the waitress who called herself number 39 was dragged into the private room. Just as she was dragged into the private room, an email piercer appeared out of nowhere and pierced into the waitress' neck, drowning out the words she was about to say. The waitress rolled her eyes and fell to the ground silently. The email piercer was a type of assassination weapon. Assassins and special agents from the Hun organization were proficient in all kinds of assassination weapons. Moreover, they would not allow anyone to see their faces clearly. If there was, they would kill. In Slaying God's world, there were only 2 definitions: dead and alive. The group of Burmese men in the private room were about to scream when they saw that. Swish, swish, swish. The gleam of a blade flashed. 3 seconds later, Slaying God walked past everyone in the private room. She was staring at the door of the private room with a shiny butterfly knife in her hand. Behind her, everyone in the private room fell to the ground in various forms of death as they trembled in fear. With a swoosh, a bloody poker card slipped from Slaying God's hand and was nailed onto a wooden table. The words Slaying God were clearly written on the poker card, implying that she was the one who killed this group of people. After doing all this, she put away her butterfly knife and expressionlessly pushed open the door of the private room. While no one noticed the corpses in the private room, she left the bar and walked into a dilapidated alley. Soon she disappeared without a trace. Slaying God, who had just debuted in the assassin and special agent circle at the age of 12, was already 163 meters tall. Her perfect figure and perfect body were enough to make any man drool. Not long after Slaying God left, 2 figures walked out of the dark. The one leading them was a handsome young man with an unfathomable gleam in his cold eyes. He watched Slaying God's departure indifferently, an unnoticeable glint in his eyes. Young master. The man standing next to the young man lowered his head and spoke to the young man with a respectful gaze and tone. Slaying God, a new agent trained by the organization? The Slaying God was God. Yes. The man nodded. As soon as the man finished speaking, he was silent for a moment before he suddenly added, Young master, you? Before the man could finish speaking, the youth turned around and took 2 large steps forward before suddenly stopping. The teenager, who was still underage, was already 1.8 meters tall. At this moment he stopped and used his magnetic voice to instruct his subordinate, who was the man. She has just joined the circle. Protect her well. I've taken a fancy to this woman. Chapter 2700. Why? The man's eyes widened in confusion when he heard his young master say that. Although his young master was young, he was a famous existence in this world. The leader of an Hun group. Although he was young, he had a brilliant brain and ruthless methods. The man did not expect his young master, who had lost his mother when he was young, to have an instinctive dislike and distance himself from women, would say something like that. Moreover, she was only 12 years old. Was he planning to keep her in captivity? However, the man would soon find out that his young master did not intend to keep the agent named Slaying God in captivity. Lin Wei, you have too many questions. After the man asked in surprise, he only heard the young man's sharp eyes glancing at the man from the corner of his eyes, calmly interrupting the man named Lin Wei. Yes, young master. Lin Wei lowered his head and stopped asking questions. After a while, Lin Wei left the place with the young man. Not long after Lin Wei and the young man left, a loud noise came from the bar. Soon, the crowd's screams, sirens and cries filled the air. 2 years later, the name of the agent, Slaying God, had spread internationally. Countless international bigwigs were eyeing her covetously and trembling in fear. However, she was still unable to enter the secret agent assassin ranking. In this field, it was useless to have strength alone, one must have influence. No matter what profession one was in, one would be praised for their outstanding abilities. However, never forget that when one was praised to the highest point, one would also be envied and schemed against by others in the same field. It was the same in the secret agent assassin circle. It was nighttime. On a well-known island in Country M. On the waters near the island, countless yachts were carrying international businessmen, politicians, the world's richest man, arms tycoons from all over the world, and the world's top secret agent assassins. Anyone who had a little reputation in the world was invited to this place. It was a large-scale international gathering of both the underworld and the underworld. A red glow flashed across the horizon. The red glow shrouded the night moon as if it was entangled with blood vessels. It was a blood-red night. Slaying God, who had just turned 14, stood on the island's large-scale ball that was built by the world's top engineers. A dark blue evening gown wrapped around her proud and beautiful figure. Under the moonlight, her smooth long hair fell to the side of her shoulders, giving her an indescribable sense of beauty. She gently held the glass of red wine and placed her hand on the banquet table, enough to make the men passing by stop in their tracks. It was a masquerade party tonight. There were more people from the righteous path. All in all, there were not many assassins and secret agents like Slaying God. Luoluo, you have everything now, but Ling Ling only has me. If I leave Ling Ling, she won't be able to live. Then can you bear to abandon me? Slaying God's eyes were fixed on a spectacular show in front of her. Slaying God placed both hands on the dining table and picked up the desserts on the table. She was feeding herself one bite at a time while watching the emotional drama unfold. He saw a man in front of him holding a woman's hand and talking to another woman who was dressed like a rich young lady. Good. I'll make you regret this. The rich young lady cried as she yelled at the man and woman. Then she ran toward Slaying God. As she was running too fast, she almost bumped into Slaying God. However, Slaying God dodged her with a sidestep. Are you the Xia family's young lady, Xia Luo? Slaying God held her, her exposed red lips curling slightly under the mask. And you are? Xia Luo wiped her tears and asked in return. Your father hired me as a bodyguard. Slaying God straightened her body and crossed her arms as she answered. Chapter 2701. Slaying God did not attend such an international banquet out of boredom. Secret agents and assassins would accept any mission as long as the employer paid them enough money. This included protecting people. Slaying God was here because Xia Luo's father had paid her enough money to hire her. Are you the bodyguard my father hired? Xia Luo asked loudly after hearing what Slaying God said. As Slaying God was wearing a mask and it was a masquerade banquet, many international bosses and triads were unwilling to show their faces. Hence, they would attend with masks on. Slaying God was the same. Slaying God nodded. Great. Since you're my dad's bodyguard, then help me kill that woman. When Xia Luo heard Slaying God's words, she sucked in a mouthful of mucus and turned around angrily. She pointed a finger at the woman beside the man who had carried her earlier and spoke to Slaying God in a commanding tone. Obviously, Xia Luo did not know that Slaying God was a secret agent. Slaying God was a secret agent whose name struck fear into the hearts of international bigshots. She was currently the most reputable secret agent in the world of secret agents and assassins. Someone once predicted that with her ability and achievements, she would one day become the top secret agent in the world. A secret agent who had just debuted 2 years ago was already given such a shocking title by the international community. Slaying God, the secret agent, was no doubt a person with great potential. Xia Luo ordered Slaying God like a rich missy, but Slaying God remained standing with her arms crossed. Her missy temper flared as she suddenly shouted at Slaying God. "Did you hear what I said? I'm asking you to kill that woman. Kill her. If you don't do it, I'll get my father to fire you." Slaying God sneered at Xia Luo's words. "My mission is to protect your personal safety. You." Xia Luo's expression changed when she heard that. However, just as Xia Luo finished her sentence, the lights in the banquet hall went off. What's going on? The crowd became restless at this moment. The doors opened and the crowd evacuated as fast as they could. Don't hit me. Xia Luo was knocked around by the crowd and soon followed the crowd out of the banquet hall. It was nighttime. The moon was covered by a thick layer of blood. It was a crimson moon. This was a scene that no one had ever seen before. Because the lights at the party had been turned off, the fiery red moon was very bright when they walked out. "Where's the staff? What's going on? Why did the lights suddenly go off in the middle of the party?" It was the voice of the person in charge reprimanding the staff. "We don't know either. We're trying to fix it as soon as possible, but for some reason the circuit won't turn back. It's as if someone deliberately cut it off." A worker replied. Slaying God had been by Xia Luo's side. She ignored the fact that Xia Luo was knocked around. Like she said, she only cared about Xia Luo's safety. Just as everyone panicked and then heaved a sigh of relief, a voice suddenly rang out. Xia Luo, including everyone present, suddenly saw 20 figures holding various weapons appear in front of them. This group of people stood in front of the crowd, on top of the few large rocks on the island, and looked down at the crowd with contempt. "Where's Slaying God?" The leader of the 20 men hollered sharply. "You are." One of the international bigwigs standing at the front asked. "Number 1 on the international secret agent ranking, codename Flying Snake. Secret agent Slaying God, we know you're here. Do you dare to come out and fight us?" The woman in the lead shouted. They were none other than the top 20 secret agent assassins on the international secret agent assassin ranking. Chapter 2702. The woman in the lead was dressed in a fiery red robe. Her face couldn't be seen clearly under the moonlight, but it could be seen from her fiery red robe that she was definitely not an ordinary woman. This woman was Flying Snake, the number 1 secret agent in the international ranking. Speaking of the Flying Serpent, it was truly a legendary figure. Flying Snake had grown up in the 70s and 80s. Since her debut in the late 70s, Flying Snake had ascended to the throne of the number 1 secret agent in the international ranking as a woman. Someone once asserted that Flying Snake would be the most outstanding female secret agent assassin. She would be the queen of achievements that no one could surpass since time immemorial. This was because there were 20 people in the top 10 of the international secret agent assassin ranking. Only 2 of them were women. Apart from Flying Snake, who occupied the number 1 spot in the international secret agent ranking. The other woman was only good enough for the 10th spot in the international assassin ranking. Compared to Flying Snake, she was not qualified at all. Flying Snake's words frightened all the businessmen, politicians, and high-ranking officials present. Sweat trickled down their foreheads. The number 1 secret agent in the international secret agent ranking, Flying Snake. Rumor had it that this woman had only failed a few missions since her debut. To think that such a terrifying woman would appear here. Why was she looking for the secret agent Slaying God who had only recently appeared in the world? "May I ask, who are the people behind you?" One of the international bigwigs reacted quickly. He quickly realized that the group of people standing behind Flying Snake were probably not small fries. Hence, he wiped the sweat off his forehead and asked Flying Snake in a low voice. They're the top 10 secret agents in the international secret agent ranking. They're the top 10 assassins in the international assassin ranking. Alright, it's time for Slaying God to come out." Flying Snake was quite straightforward. She pointed at the group of people standing behind her and said those words loudly. Then she changed the topic. The pair of snake-like eyes scanned the group of people, trying to capture the agent named Slaying God. "Slaying God? Slaying God? You're the bodyguard my father asked to protect me. You must protect me?" Xia Luo hid behind slaying God in fear after finding her. However, just as Xia Luo hid behind slaying God and grabbed slaying God's evening gown tightly with her fingers, slaying God suddenly flung her hand away from her gown. Under everyone's watchful eyes and the blood-red moonlight, slaying God walked fearlessly to the people led by Flying Snake. "You're slaying God." When the Flying Snake saw that the person in front of it was actually a young girl who appeared to be only 14 or 15 years old, it was stunned for a moment before speaking. Slaying God looked up and shot a cold glance at Flying Serpent. "Why are you looking for me? Hey, you really are slaying God. You'd better listen carefully. You're a few decades behind us in this world, yet you dare to steal our name. Today will make you regret living in this world." Flying Snake snickered in front of everyone, stating his intention to slaying God without hesitation. The top 10 secret agent assassins in the international secret agent ranking were ganging up on a secret agent, slaying God, who had only debuted 2 years ago. That was already giving her enough face. All the businessmen and politicians present were pale with fright. Just when everyone thought that slaying God would back off, she suddenly met everyone's gaze. Her sharp eyes, which were hidden under her bangs, suddenly looked up and 2 butterfly knives appeared in her hands out of nowhere. Then she retaliated with the most savage and terrifying words. "So, the 20 of you are here to die? Come. Wonderful book house." Chapter 2703. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. The 20 people standing in front of him were not ordinary people. That was one of the top assassins in the world. 20 of the top 10 international secret agent assassins. Among these 20 people, any one of them would be able to make a name for themselves if they went international. And now, these 20 people were gathered together to deal with a newbie who had just debuted in the assassin and secret agent circle for 2 years. Did this special agent named Slaying God really have the ability to defeat her? Did they need 20 of the top 10 assassins in the international secret agent ranking list to defeat her? How conceited. The Flying Snake glanced at Yun Jian with contempt. "Flying Snake, don't waste your breath on her. Just attack." Standing beside the Flying Snake was a man who was holding a big hammer in each hand. He knocked the 2 big hammers against each other and revealed a set of bloodthirsty teeth under the blood-red moonlight. The international businessmen, politicians, CEOs of various multinational corporations, and countless bosses from both the underworld and the underworld stepped aside, leaving the scene to Slaying God and the top 20 international secret agent assassins. This was undoubtedly a contest between kings whose strength reigned supreme. If anyone else went up to him, only death would await them. Xia Luo, who was pushed to the side, was also scared. After she was pushed to the side, her entire body trembled. She had never expected that the person her father had sent to protect her would be a special agent. Moreover, it was a special agent who could summon such a terrifying lineup to kill her. Just as Xia Luo was cowering in the corner in fear, trembling all over, everyone was certain that Slaying God was dead for sure. In front of everyone, Slaying God placed her hand on the hem of her evening gown and tore it from the bottom to the top. Slaying God's clothes were completely shredded by her and the evening gown was tossed to the ground. Slaying God's dress was torn to shreds by her. Just as everyone was puzzled by Slaying God's action, Slaying God appeared in front of everyone in an evening gown wearing a form-fitting black top and a pair of leather shorts that looked very similar to those of the assassins in the movie. Although she was only 14 years old, her pair of slender thighs were so perfect that no one could ignore them. However, that was not the main point. The main point was that Slaying God was wearing all sorts of killer weapons under the evening gown. It was as if she had long known that someone was going to make a move on her. "You?" Flying Snake and the rest were about to attack, but when they saw that Slaying God seemed to have anticipated their appearance and had prepared all their weapons in place, Flying Snake stopped the group behind him from attacking with one arm and frowned. After all, Flying Snake was the #1 agent on the International Secret Service rankings. He wasn't a brainless idiot. "I've been waiting for you here for a long time. Since you're here, come at me together." Just as Flying Snake frowned and cried out in shock, Slaying God was already sprinting toward them with 2 butterfly knives in her hands. At night, the blood-red moonlight shrouded the horizon. As soon as she said that, Slaying God appeared behind Flying Snake and the rest in a flash. In front of everyone, she used her speed, accuracy, ruthlessness to grab the weakest assassin standing at the back. One butterfly knife blocked the assassin's blade that came slashing toward her when he reacted, while the other butterfly knife pierced the assassin's head. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 2704. The 20 people standing in front of her were no ordinary people. They were the best in the world on the International Secret Agent Assassin ranking. The top 20 on the International Secret Agent Assassin ranking. Among these 20 people, any one of them would be able to make a name for themselves if they were to go international. Now, all 20 of them were gathered together to fight a newbie who had just debuted in the Secret Agent Assassin Circle 2 years ago. Did this secret agent named Slaying God really have the ability to defeat her? Did they need the top 20 on the International Secret Agent Assassin ranking to defeat her? How arrogant. Flying Snake glanced at Yun Jian in disdain. Flying Snake, don't waste your breath on her. Let's go. Standing beside the Flying Snake was a man who was holding a big hammer in each hand. He knocked the two big hammers against each other and revealed a set of bloodthirsty teeth under the blood-red moonlight. The international businessmen, politicians, CEOs of various multinational corporations, and countless bosses from both the underworld and the underworld stepped aside, leaving the scene to Slaying God and the 20 people on the International Secret Agent Assassin ranking. This was no doubt a battle between the kings of strength. Death was the only way out for the rest of them if they joined in. Xia Luo, who was pushed to the side by the collision, was also frightened. She was trembling all over after being pushed to the side. She never thought that the person her father sent to protect her would be a secret agent. Moreover, it was a secret agent who could summon such a terrifying lineup to kill her. Just as Xia Luo was cowering in a corner, trembling in fear, and everyone was certain that Slaying God was dead for sure, Slaying God suddenly placed her hand on the hem of her evening gown and tore it from top to bottom in front of everyone. Slaying God's clothes were completely shredded by her and the evening gown was tossed to the ground. Slaying God's dress was torn to shreds by her. Just as everyone was wondering what Slaying God had done, Slaying God, who was wearing a tight-fitting black top and a pair of leather shorts similar to the secret agent assassin in the movies, appeared in front of everyone. Although she was only 14 years old, her slender thighs were so perfect that no one could ignore them. However, that was not the point. The point was that Slaying God was wearing all kinds of assassin weapons under the evening gown. It was as if she had long known that someone was going to make a move on her. Flying Snake and the rest were about to attack, but when they saw that Slaying God seemed to have anticipated their appearance and had prepared all their weapons in place, Flying Snake stopped the group of people behind him with one arm and frowned. After all, Flying Snake was the #1 agent on the International Secret Service rankings. He wasn't a brainless idiot. I've been waiting for you here for a long time. Since you're here, come at me together. Just as Flying Snake frowned and cried out in shock, Slaying God was already dashing toward them with 2 butterfly knives in her hands. At night, the blood-red moonlight shrouded the horizon. As soon as he said that, Slaying God took a quick step and appeared behind Flying Snake and the rest. In front of everyone, she used her speed, accuracy, ruthlessness to grab the weakest assassin standing at the back. One of the butterfly knives blocked the assassin's blade that came slashing at him after he reacted. The other butterfly knife pierced the assassin's head. Chapter 2705. Splat. Slaying God pierced the assassin's head in 0.5 seconds and pulled the butterfly knife out of the assassin's head. Blood splattered everywhere and the sound of blood dripping could be heard. One of the top 20 assassins on the International Secret Agent ranking was dead. Don't think that Flying Snake and the others would mourn the death of their comrade when they saw this. To Flying Snake and the rest, getting rid of the secret agent Slaying God was the reason they had agreed to be temporary companions. Like Slaying God, the secret agent assassins on the International Secret Agent ranking came from a ruthless assassin organization. To them, human lives were worthless. However, after Slaying God killed one of the assassins, the 19 men led by Flying Snake widened their eyes in shocked that Slaying God had attacked so quickly. However, even though they were shocked, this group of people led by the Flying Snake were all kings who had survived from the brink of death. After Slaying God killed the first assassin, almost at the same time she attacked, someone wielded a long saber and slashed it at her neck. Someone slashed at her from the front with a long saber while someone from the back attacked her from the back where her heart was. Someone at the side even threw out a poison dart. She was surrounded by a group of people. Slaying God was still a 14-year-old child with enemies on all sides. However, Slaying God dodged to the side, choosing to avoid the attacks from the back and side. She leaned back and grabbed the long saber from the secret agent who attacked her first. The saber was razor sharp. Blood dripped from Slaying God's palm as the saber's blade grazed her palm. Just looking at it was enough to scare anyone. It's over. Secret agent Slaying God is done for. Someone in the crowd covered his eyes and exclaimed. Just when everyone thought that slaying God was done for, she held the long saber in her palm as if she did not feel pain. She allowed the blade to crush her palm as blood splattered everywhere. Holding the long saber, she leaped from the ground and did a 180-degree somersault. Holding the long saber in her bleeding hand, she slid it across the secret agent's neck. Splat, splat, splat. The secret agent's neck was slit and he fell to the ground. Oh my God. Her hand is covered in blood. Doesn't she feel pain? A rich girl in the crowd could not help but exclaim. So this is a battle between secret agents and assassins. This is a battle between kings. An international business tycoon couldn't help but hold his head and look at the scene in front of him with the most astonished gaze in his life. PFFF. PFFF. At that moment, Slaying God pulled out 4 darts from her waist and threw them at the 4 assassins who were attacking her at lightning speed. The 4 assassins rolled on the ground, but the darts that Slaying God tossed out did not manage to scratch the skin on their arms in time. The 4 assassins did not care about the scratch on their arms. Just as they were about to make their way to Yunjian, they suddenly foamed at the mouth and convulsed on the ground. 3 seconds later they stopped sucking in deep breaths. The 4 darts were coated with Slaying God's special poison. As long as there was even a tiny scratch on his skin, he would die without a doubt. It's time to end this childish game. Just as Slaying God evaded the group's attack, Flying Snake led the 6 most powerful men on the international secret agent assassin ranking to attack Slaying God at the same time. As soon as he said that, Flying Snake took a big step towards Slaying God. Slaying God did a backflip and the man with the big hammer smashed it down on her head. Slaying God, who was only 14 years old, was overwhelmed by the enemies who were the most elite secret agent assassins in the world. At that moment, the big hammer was right in front of Slaying God's eyes and was about to crush her head. Just when everyone thought that Slaying God was a newbie after all and that she would definitely die in this series of attacks. Then a terrifying scene unfolded before their eyes. Chapter 2706. Slaying God turned her body around and lifted her legs just as the hammers were about to hit her. She used her beautiful legs to block the impact of the hammers. Crack. 2 huge hammers smashed hard on Slaying God's ankles. That excruciating pain sent chills down the spines of the onlookers just by hearing the sound of bones breaking. Unsurprisingly, Slaying God's ankles were broken. However, Slaying God did not care about that at all. She merely frowned slightly and endured the excruciating pain. She bent her body halfway and flung the ring on her finger upward just as the man with the hammers shattered her ankles. It was not a ring but a finger blade. There was a ring on the outside of the finger blade. A small blade was installed inside and a mechanism was designed. Usually the sharp blade could be hidden in the ring. When the target was close enough to press the mechanism, the sharp blade would come out. The moment the man broke Slaying God's ankles, she did not even grunt in pain. She flung the small blade in the finger blade and slit the man's throat. No one present had ever seen such a terrifying woman. She was able to kill her opponent at the same time that she was enduring immense pain. No one was born a powerhouse. An outsider would never be able to understand what a powerhouse had gone through. Pfft. Just as the man landed, Flying Snake's dagger stabbed into Slaying God's thigh. If the man's attack shattered Slaying God's ankles, then Flying Snake's attack was enough to make a living person suffer excruciating pain worse than death. Die. Die. Flying Snake grinned menacingly as he stabbed Slaying God's thigh. The 14-year-old Slaying God could kill so many people even when she was surrounded by 20 of the top 10 assassins on the International Secret Agent Assassin chart. Moreover, the man with the hammer was the #1 assassin on the International Assassin chart. She had killed him. She had only debuted for 2 years and already had such achievements. If Slaying God was allowed to grow in the future, it would not take long. In another 2 years, Slaying God would definitely become the one who replaced them. Flying Snake could not let that happen. Therefore she stabbed Slaying God's thigh. Kill her. Quick. The Flying Snake yelled at the assassin standing behind it after stabbing Slaying God's thigh. The group of assassins and agents following closely behind were just about to make their move. Slaying God arched her hands into the shape of an eagle's claws and attacked the Flying Snake's eyes with both hands. It dug into the Flying Snake's pupils and dug out the Flying Snake's eyeballs along with its roots. The Flying Snake's eyeballs were suddenly plucked out by Slaying God. She let go of her grip and shrieked. Slaying God did not even blink. She pulled out the dagger that the Flying Snake had stabbed into her thigh and plunged it straight into the Flying Snake's heart. 10 seconds later, the flying snake struggled for a bit before falling to the ground with a thud, no longer breathing. Flying Snake, ranked number 1 on the International Secret Agent ranking, and Big Hammer, ranked number 1 on the International Assassin ranking, were killed. The two strongest people in the group were dead. He died in the hands of Slaying God, an agent who had only been in the game for 2 years. Everyone was stunned at this moment. The remaining 12 agents and assassins at the back stopped in their tracks, not daring to go any further. Regardless of whether Slaying God would die here today, this battle of life and death was enough to make Slaying God famous all over the world. However, just when everyone thought that Slaying God would not be able to stand up again, Xia Luo's eyes widened and everyone's faces turned pale with fear. Suddenly, a shocking scene happened. Slaying God tore apart the white shirt on the flying snake's corpse and wrapped it around her thigh like a bandage, adeptly wrapping it tightly around her bleeding thigh. He tied up the leg that was close to being crippled and stood up again in front of everyone. Come. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2707. An Hun Organization. Lin Wei stood in front of an inconspicuous villa in the Hun Organization. An Hun Organization was huge, as big as a maze. On the other hand, this villa, which was amazing in any corner outside, suddenly became inconspicuous in this place. Soon, a slender figure walked out of the villa. Seeing this, Lin Wei turned sideways and bowed slightly to the slender figure walking out of the villa. Young Master. The person who walked out of the villa was the leader of an Hun Organization, as well as the Young Master of Cold Pavilion, the largest international firearms organization, CE. At this moment, he answered softly from his thin lips. CE walked past Lin Wei as soon as he finished speaking. When he walked past Lin Wei, he turned and ordered him, "Send her back to her place. Remember, don't tell her about my appearance." He was referring to Slaying God. Lin Wei was stunned, but due to his status, he lowered his head slightly and nodded to CE. "Yes, sir." Slaying God was severely injured after killing the top 10 assassins on the International Secret Agent Assassin ranking. However, with Slaying God's stamina, she would recover in less than a month. Moreover, an Hun Organization's medical facilities were excellent. Slaying God could continue with the missions assigned by the organization after a month. However, due to the Bloody Night incident a month ago, Slaying God shot to fame and became the number 1 on the International Secret Agent ranking. Following that, her bounty increased significantly. The name, Slaying God, swept across the world at the speed of a roaring typhoon. 2 months later. Xia Multinational Group. There's still no way. Why is there still no way? A woman in her 20s held her head and slowly squatted on the ground. She was so anxious that her eyes were about to pop out. However, she did not cry. If it were in the past, she would have cried long ago. However, she could not cry now. Her father suddenly passed away in the company 3 months ago. Her mother was so heartbroken that she fainted and was sent to the hospital for emergency treatment. She was barely saved, but the doctor said that she might not wake up for the rest of her life. After the death of the Xia Group's chairman, all the shareholders withdrew their shares. Her relatives who used to follow her orders all came forward to snatch her father's company away. In just 3 months, Xia Luo went from a crafty and ruthless young lady to someone who was worse than an ordinary person and had nowhere to settle down. 3 months was enough to change a person. 3 months ago, Xia Luo used to be a spendthrift and yelled at the servants. Now she was just an ordinary person. She wanted to keep her father's company. She even used her own ability to hold a shareholders' meeting, but without exception, she failed miserably. It wasn't that they didn't have the ability to do so, but that no one was willing to listen to a young lady whose family had fallen from grace. In the past, she had always been at the beck and call of the family. Could it be that it really ended just like that? Xia Luo's hand that was placed on the coffee table drooped down slightly. She stared blankly ahead. The series of blows over the past 3 months had caused Xia Luo to become shockingly thin. However, the moment Xia Luo's hand slightly drooped, a pair of white shoes suddenly appeared in front of her eyes. "Are you willing to follow me? I can give you enough money to make a comeback." This voice must be the most beautiful voice that Xia Luo had ever heard in her life. Xia Luo lifted her head immediately and saw Slaying God's face wearing the same mask as the Bloody Night incident 3 months ago. You are?" Xia Luo exclaimed. However, before she could finish her sentence, Slaying God cut her off and said, "You're right. From today onwards, the Xia Group will be renamed as the Rongyao Company. The young lady of the Xia Group, Xia Luo, is dead. You will be the president of the Rongyao Company, codenamed Demonis." Chapter 2708. Slaying God's words left no room for her to refute. She had guessed correctly that she would not reject her. A month later, the demoness who had cut off her long hair for 10 years, attended the shareholders' meeting. With her unique and amazing eloquence, she turned the tide and made the Xia Group, which had no hope of rising again, run the company's economy again. Slaying God did not simply pick Demoness to be the president of Rongyao Company. Before the Demoness family fell, she was indeed pampered and spoiled. She was so delicate that it was as if she had accidentally scratched her finger. It was as if she was about to die. However, Slaying God had her eyes on Demoness' ability. She was able to face reality and successfully hold a shareholders' meeting with her own abilities when her family was going through such a drastic change. Although it ended in failure. What happened in the future proved that Slaying God had made the right choice. Demoness had indeed done it. She had brought Rongyao Company to a stage that was even more glorious than Xia Group. Not long in the future, Rongyao Company would become one of the top 10 international corporations under Demoness leadership. Of course, these were things that would happen in the future. The flying snake that Slaying God had slain was the internationally renowned boss of kosher mercenaries. After Slaying God had slain Flying Snake, she led the forces that she had developed over the past 2 years into the kosher mercenaries. She took over the kosher mercenaries when the kosher mercenaries had no leader. Since then, Slaying God had become the boss of kosher mercenaries, the largest mercenary group in the world outside of Hun's organization. Snake, Lizard and Tiger. Leopard were rescued by Slaying God after annihilating an assassin organization not long after her debut at the age of 13. Snake, Lizard and Tiger. Leopard were shockingly talented. One was skilled in using poison while the other had strong arms. They became Slaying God's left and right arms later on. Not long after establishing Rongyao Company and developing the kosher mercenaries, Slaying God found Qing Yu, who was almost killed in an assassin organization and had a particularly sensitive sense of smell. Little Qing Yu was still shivering when she was dragged to the snake. Read more chapter on novel full, I'll give her to you. She has a sensitive sense of smell. She should be a good candidate for making poison, Slaying God said after pushing Qing Yu to Snake. Lizard. There really is such a cute person. Snake. Lizard studied Qing Yu from head to toe. From then on, Qing Yu became Snake, Lizard's first disciple. It had to be said that the most important talent in making poisons was the sense of smell. Qing Yu's sense of smell was as sensitive as a dog's. This was not a derogatory term. A police dog's nose was so sensitive that it could smell the things that a person had used and track the person's whereabouts. If one's nose wasn't sensitive enough, it would be like a teacher who had just graduated from primary school teaching. It wouldn't be convincing at all. When Slaying God turned 16, she requested to leave the Hun organization in advance. Hun organization approved. This was something that the Hun organization had never done before. For an assassin organization like Hun, even if the assassins and agents of Hun fulfilled the 5-year agreement and obtained their freedom, they would not be able to survive in this world if they dared to leave. Slaying God became the first. The world only knew that Slaying God had retired from the Hun organization based on her own capabilities, but they did not know that the leader of Hun had gone easy on her. Otherwise, with Hun's influence, it was impossible for Slaying God to grow to the point where the organization could no longer control her. It was only when Slaying God suddenly disappeared one day when she was 16 that the leader of Hun organization secretly sent people to search for Slaying God's whereabouts. It was to no avail. It was only when Hun's leader, CE, learned that Slaying God had been searching for a treasure called the sandalwood box before she went missing. She only went missing after she found the sandalwood box. It was only then that CE began to search for the sandalwood box in a frenzy, until he met a girl named Yun Jian who had a similar personality to Slaying God in a barren place called Xinjiang town of Longmen City. Author has something to say. The next chapter begins with the arrival of the cold demon. Smack. Smack smack smack, run away shyly. Chapter 2709. Lung Mei had no parents since she was young. She was an orphan. She was only 7 years old when the leader of the Blood Doll brought her home. The leader of the Blood Doll wasn't Di Lin, but his father, Di Luan. Di Luan was a very famous person back then. The Blood Doll organization was also very famous in the beginning. Lung Mei's real name wasn't Lung Mei. She didn't have a name. Her surname was given to her by Di Luan. Di Luan treated Lung Mei as his goddaughter because his wife wanted to have a daughter when she was alive. Unfortunately, she couldn't give birth to a daughter until she died. Di Luan loved his wife very much and followed her orders back then. So when his wife passed away, Di Luan found Leng Mei and took her as his goddaughter in order to mourn for her. Leng Mei was still very timid back then. When she was brought into the Blood Doll organization, she hid behind Di Luan and tightly grabbed onto his clothes. "Kid, she's your sister from now on," Di Luan said to Di Lin, who was only 10 years old back then, as he rubbed Leng Mei's head lovingly. Di Lin's skin was white and clear when he was 10 years old. Di Lin didn't have the habit of wearing black clothes and hats back then, so he didn't wear the black hat behind his collar. But that innate coldness made Leng Mei even more afraid. "I don't have a sister." At that time the 10-year-old Di Lin only glanced coldly at Leng Mei, then turned and walked out of the hall. "You little brat." Di Luan was so angry that his whole body trembled. "Big brother doesn't seem to like me." Leng Mei tightly grabbed onto Di Luan's clothes and said to him in fear, "It's nothing. Mei, if that brat dares to bully you, tell Godfather. Godfather will help you teach him a lesson." Di Luan said softly as he rubbed Leng Mei's head that didn't even reach his waist. Leng Mei stayed in the Blood Doll organization for 10 days. She didn't see Di Lin during these 10 days. Leng Mei let out a sigh of relief and started to treat the Blood Doll organization as her home. She walked out of a large building in the Blood Doll organization. Suddenly her vision blurred. Then, a boy half a head taller than Leng Mei pressed her against the wall and looked at her coldly. "Get out of here or I'll teach you a lesson." It was Di Lin. Leng Mei was startled. She was so scared that she didn't know what to do. She grabbed Di Lin's clothes, her big watery eyes as dazzling as pearls. "Brother. I'm scared." At that time, Di Lin was stunned by Leng Mei's sudden words. The young Di Lin's face flushed red. Perhaps it was because Leng Mei was too cute. However, Di Lin quickly shifted his gaze to the side. "If you don't want to stay here, then just you wait." After saying this, Di Lin was afraid that Leng Mei would notice the abnormality in his expression. He snorted and turned to leave. This was the last time the 7-year-old Leng Mei saw Di Lin. The 10-year-old Di Lin had been sent to the Blood Doll organization's assassin training center by the leader of the Blood Doll organization, Di Luan, and had started 9 years of assassin training. For the next 9 years, Leng Mei lived a very good life in the Blood Doll organization. And Di Luan didn't really spoil Leng Mei at home. Di Luan knew that in their line of work they had a lot of enemies. In order to protect Leng Mei, they had to train her to the point where she could protect themselves. Who knew that Leng Mei was very talented in this aspect? 9 years later, the 16-year-old Leng Mei was almost invincible in the Blood Doll organization. Di Luan was very pleased. "Mei, the Blood Doll organization will be taken over by that brat Lin one day. Although you're not my biological daughter, in my heart, you're already closer to me than my biological daughter. So as your father, I hope that you can stay away from all the darkness in the world and live a normal life. Father has already chosen some decent young masters from decent families for you. Take a look, if there's anyone suitable, you should get married as soon as possible." Di Luan knew that he didn't have long to live. That was why he wanted to arrange all this for Leng Mei at the age of 16. Di Luan had once been stabbed by someone near his heart. In recent years that injury had acted up again and he often vomited blood. Di Luan was afraid that after he left, his son Di Lin would bully Leng Mei. That was why he said this to Leng Mei. "Father, I don't want to leave you." Leng Mei frowned and spoke her mind. "If you want me to live a better life, then you should get married." Di Luan covered his mouth and suddenly coughed violently as he berated Leng Mei. "Father, what's wrong? Haven't you recovered from the cold from last time?" Leng Mei saw this and stood up anxiously to ask Di Luan. "I'm fine. As long as you promise me, my body will be better than anyone else." Di Luan coughed and said. Leng Mei lowered her eyes and agreed. "Okay." She originally thought that her life would be obedient to Di Luan and marry an ordinary person. That would be it for the rest of her life. When she came out of Di Luan's bedroom, Leng Mei was still thinking about some fundamental questions. But when she passed by the door of the villa that had been abandoned 9 years ago, someone suddenly covered her mouth from behind. She didn't even notice that someone was behind her. When Leng Mei reacted, she was already tied to a wooden stool in a small attic. Her hands and feet were tied to the stool with hemp rope. When she saw the fair-skinned handsome man in front of her, Leng Mei cried out loudly, "Woo woo! I told you to leave 9 years ago but you didn't. Did you forget my advice?" Di Lin, who had just returned from his studies, looked at Leng Mei with contempt. However, when he saw Leng Mei's delicate and soft body, he suddenly recalled the little girl from 9 years ago who was so frightened by him that she grabbed his clothes and called him brother. Pitch. Leng Mei shook her head. Her mouth was covered and she couldn't make a sound. When Di Lin saw this, his mouth suddenly went dry. His hand moved and a dagger appeared in his hand. "Ha, you don't know what's good for you? Seems like you won't leave until I teach you a lesson?" With that, he used the dagger to cut Lung Mei's clothes in a punishing manner. Her thin clothes were cut by Di Lin. Lung Mei's thin clothes were torn apart, and her bra was also torn apart because of the force of the slash. The moment her clothes were torn apart, her white and full breasts were exposed without any reservation. New book release date is July 11, 2019. Death God and Killer reborn on campus. The first post on my QQ space is the new female lead's character design. Q number 2625702229. Chapter 2710. Di Lin didn't expect this either. He only wanted to scare Lung Mei away from Blood Doll, but he didn't expect that the knife would cut through her clothes and even cut through her clothes. Turning his head to the side, Di Lin's face was cold, but he couldn't forget the white skin that appeared in front of his eyes. Lung Mei was also frightened. Her hands and legs were tied to the wooden stool and she couldn't move at all. She could only let herself be exposed to the air. "Remember what I said. Leave Blood Doll or I'll make you regret being born." Di Lin turned his head to the side and said coldly. With that, Di Lin turned to leave. But after taking 2 steps, Di Lin used the knife in his hand to cut through the ropes binding Lung Mei. He then took off his jacket and put it on Lung Mei. Without looking back, he turned and left. After Lung Mei was untied, the first thing she did was to tear off the white cloth covering her mouth and shout at Di Lin, who was walking out the door. "Even if you kill me, I won't leave as long as my father is here." Lung Mei was raised by Di Lin. Di Lin gave her fatherly love that she couldn't have. He gave her a warm and dependable family. To Lung Mei, as long as Di Lin was here, she wouldn't leave. She wouldn't refuse even if Di Lin asked her to go through hell. Di Lin's threats were useless against her. Di Lin took 2 steps out of the small attic of the abandoned villa and stopped at the entrance. After a slight pause, Di Lin strode out and left without looking back. 3 days later. In order to welcome his son Di Lin's return and to help him integrate into the circle, Di Lin held a banquet. Although the current Blood Doll organization was an international organization, it was still a small organization that couldn't be compared to a truly large organization. Di Lin was already very impressive to be able to develop Blood Doll to its current state from scratch. The guests of this banquet weren't important people from the international community, but people with some status in the world. Actually, Di Lin had 2 goals. One was to introduce his son Di Lin, and the other was to find a husband for Lung Mei. The first segment went very smoothly. Di Lin himself had the aura of a king, enough to suppress the crowd, so he quickly made friends with many of Di Lin's friends. Di Lin saw that things were going smoothly on Di Lin's side, so he let Lung Mei hold his hand and brought Lung Mei to meet the young masters of the righteous forces. Rather than a meeting, it was more like a blind date in disguise. "Can you cook?" The person Di Lin chose was a wealthy young master. At this moment, the young master was looking at Lung Mei with an interrogative expression. Lung Mei shook his head. "Then can you bear me a son? This is the most important thing. My family property needs a son to inherit. If you can't give me a son, or if you give birth to a daughter after marriage, you can't blame me for going out to find another woman after marriage." The young master, who was only 1 centimeter taller than the man in flats, looked at Lung Mei with a wretched tone as if he was picking up leftovers. Indeed, Lung Mei's godfather, Di Lin, was afraid that Lung Mei wouldn't be able to get married and was frantically looking for a son-in-law for her. This made Lung Mei, who was only 16 years old, sound like an old leftover woman. Marriage couldn't be rushed. Now that Di Lin was anxious, things went in the opposite direction. "Other than these, I'm very satisfied with you. In that case The young master was still talking to himself. Lung Mei's frown deepened. If her godfather hadn't told her to forget her skills and become an ordinary person again, she would have grabbed this young master and given him a good beating. "She's not getting married." Scram. Just as young Master Gu was still talking to himself, a fair hand wrapped around Lung Mei's arm. It was Di Lin. The young master of the Imperial Linshao dynasty grabbed Lung Mei and walked out in front of everyone. The crowd was left bewildered. Di Lin still maintained his cold face and dragged Lung Mei out of the banquet. He pinned her against the wall and looked at her with disgust. "Father brought her up since she was young. How can you like someone like that? Are you trying to embarrass him?" With that, Di Lin grabbed Lung Mei's chin and lifted her chin to look at him, provoking her further. "Since you're so casual, why don't you be my mistress? Other than love and marriage, I can give you anything he can give you." Chapter 27:11. Lung Mei could hear the mockery in Di Lin's words. Lung Mei could hear the mockery and disdain in Di Lin's words. Lung Mei was not a weak woman. She fiercely shook off Di Lin's death grip and glared at Di Lin, saying, "Don't worry, I won't embarrass my father. I'll find a man who can make your blood doll organization proud." With that, Lung Mei turned around and returned to the banquet. For some reason, Di Lin's heart skipped a beat when he heard Lung Mei's last sentence. He was displeased for a moment. Very displeased. Lung Mei was angered by Di Lin's words. She was walking back to the banquet. Just as they were halfway there, the banquet hall was suddenly filled with loud noises. Lung Mei's footsteps paused as he suddenly had a bad premonition. She took a step forward and rushed back to the banquet hall. From afar, she saw her godfather, who had treated her like his own daughter since she was a child, lying unconscious in the crowd. Di Lun was dead. His death came even earlier than he had expected. In the end, the Grim Reaper didn't let him wait until Lung Mei was safely married off. Instead, he took his life. Di Lin stopped the banquet midway. The next few days were spent preparing for Di Lun's funeral. Lung Mei was in a daze. She often sat in front of her godfather's grave for an entire day. In Lung Mei's heart, Di Lun was her biological father. Perhaps to them he was even closer than family. Lung Mei had no parents since she was young. Di Lun's fatherly love was her motivation. But to Di Lun, Lung Mei was the daughter of his beloved wife. Lung Mei was depressed for half a year. In this half a year, too many things happened. Di Lin replaced Di Lun and became the leader of the Blood Doll organization. In just half a year, Di Lin led the Blood Doll organization from a small organization in Southeast Asia to become the third most powerful assassin organization in Southeast Asia. This meant that in the near future, the Blood Doll organization would reach new heights under Di Lin's leadership. It wasn't something that the title of the third most powerful assassin organization in Southeast Asia could restrict. Di Lun's death didn't seem to affect Di Lin at all. Lung Mei, on the other hand, could not sleep well without eating. Half a year after Di Lun's death, Lung Mei was disheartened. Before she could repay Di Lun, the man who had raised her and treated her like his own daughter, he had died. Lung Mei planned to leave. Of course, before leaving, she went to see Di Lin. Di Lin was Di Lun's son after all. She couldn't repay Di Lun's kindness to her, so she decided to repay Di Lun's kindness to Di Lin. "You're leaving?" Di Lin asked when he saw Lung Mei coming to find him in his study. "Yes." Lung Mei nodded, not looking at Di Lin. "Father has left. I want to ask you if there's anything I can help with," Lung Mei said. Di Lin wasn't stupid. He immediately understood what Lung Mei meant. "You want to repay me?" Di Lin chuckled. Lung Mei did not respond, which was taken as a tacit agreement. "As long as I can help you, I'll do my best," Lung Mei said after 2 seconds of silence. "I'll satisfy you." Di Lin got up from his chair and strode to Lung Mei. He kicked the book on the desk, flipped Lung Mei over with one hand and pressed her against the desk. With the other hand he tore off Lung Mei's pants. He was as cold as ever. "If you want to repay me, I'll satisfy you. I need a woman to sleep with me. As long as you agree, father's kindness will be written off." With that, Di Lin tore off the last piece of Lung Mei's pants that covered her body. He took off everything on his lower body, lifted her beautiful legs, and the new book will be released on July 11, 2019. Death God and Assassin Reborn on Campus. The first post on my QQ space is the new female lead's character design. Q number 2625702229. Chapter 27:12. Lung Mei didn't reject Di Lin in the end. Perhaps it was because she wanted to repay Di Lun's kindness, but Di Lun was dead and she couldn't do so anymore. So she decided to return the favor to Di Lun's son, Di Lin. Of course, the main reason was that Lung Mei didn't hate Di Lin. When Di Lin pressed her against the desk and thrust into her body, Lung Mei grabbed Di Lin's shirt that he hadn't taken off and bit her red lips. She was so stunned that she didn't even make a sound. When Di Lin saw Lung Mei's frowning expression, his anger exploded. Originally, he wanted to gently cover her head and even bend down to kiss her red lips. However, when he saw Lung Mei's expression of forbearance for the sake of repaying his debt of gratitude, he instantly disappeared. Di Lin grabbed Lung Mei's slender waist with both hands and thrust inside her body. Because he had never had a woman before, Di Lin didn't know the meaning of gentle treatment. Lung Mei's upper body swayed left and right as Di Lin grabbed her waist. In the end, she grabbed the corner of the desk tightly to prevent herself from flying out. She knew that this was a loveless sex. After he was done, Di Lin didn't even look at Lung Mei, who was lying on the desk. He left a cold sentence and left the study. If you want to repay my father's kindness, you can leave after I'm tired of playing with you. When he said this, the veins on Di Lin's forehead bulged. With that, Di Lin put on the black hat behind his black sweater, covering his fair face with the black hat. An imperceptible luster flashed in front of his eyes, but Di Lin quickly left. He was afraid that Leng Mei would think that she had repaid his kindness and suddenly leave after he left. So he left those harsh words. After Di Lin left, Leng Mei put on her clothes. She sat for a while in the study where Di Lin's aura still lingered, then returned to her room. On the way back, Leng Mei met Ruoyin, Di Lin's subordinate who had been following Di Lin ever since he returned to the Blood Doll organization. Leng Mei didn't know about Di Lin's past. She thought that Ruoyin wasn't just Di Lin's subordinate. She even thought that Ruoyin was just a tool to warm Di Lin's bed. Leng Mei didn't even look at Ruoyin. She walked around Ruoyin and wanted to walk forward. Are you Blood Dolls, Leng Mei? Just as Leng Mei was about to go around Ruoyin, Ruoyin suddenly called out to him. Upon hearing Ruoyin's words, Leng Mei stopped in her tracks and turned to look at Ruoyin. She openly admitted, yes. What's the matter? Leng Mei asked. No. Ruoyin shook her head and glanced at Leng Mei a few more times. This was the first time Leng Mei and Ruoyin had met. However, Leng Mei mistakenly thought that Ruoyin was also Di Lin's woman. Therefore he did not have a good impression of Ruoyin. Hearing Ruoyin's words, Leng Mei turned and left. Ruoyin stared at Leng Mei's departing figure for quite a while. Her voluptuous breasts and plump buttocks, her enchanting figure, as well as her slender waist that was wrapped in tights that could be wrapped with 2 hands. It had to be said that Leng Mei's figure and appearance could be called the #1 beauty in the Blood Doll organization. Unfortunately, Leng Mei was in the Blood Doll organization and was recognized as the #1 expert of the Blood Doll. Ruoyin held her chin and looked at Leng Mei's departing figure, deep in thought. Tsk, so this was the woman that the chief liked for so many years. Leng Mei. Chapter 27:13. Ruoyin was indeed Di Lin's subordinate. Moreover, she was Di Lin's #1 subordinate. Di Lin was outstanding and was the target of many women's adoration. However, Ruoyin did not like Di Lin. Moreover, Ruoyin had someone she liked. The reason why Ruoyin followed Di Lin was because she was very powerful. Di Lin needed a powerful subordinate like her. Ruoyin needed Di Lin to get close to the person she liked. From then on, Leng Mei was Di Lin's mistress in the Blood Doll organization. This was something that everyone in the Blood Doll organization knew. Leng Mei did not care. She didn't care who had spread the news. Repaying her godfather, Di Luan, was the one thing that Leng Mei wanted to do the most. Di Lin would call Leng Mei to his room almost every night. After torturing her, he would let her return to her room. This seemed to have become a habit. 2 years passed just like that. 2 years later, Leng Mei was 18 years old. After being Di Lin's mistress for 2 years, Leng Mei's figure was much more voluptuous than when she was 16. Her chest was slender and graceful. Just walking out of the house would make people turn their heads. In the Blood Doll organization, Leng Mei, who had been Di Lin's mistress for 2 years, could do whatever she wanted in the organization. There were even people in the organization who claimed that Di Lin had no other women other than Leng Mei. He must like Leng Mei. Leng Mei would become the mistress of the Blood Doll organization's leader in the future. This was an unshakable fact. When these words came out, Leng Mei only smiled coldly. Others might not know, but how could she not know? When Di Lin was doing that with her, he had never kissed her lips. If Di Lin really liked her, how could he not kiss her? However, in reality, after being Di Lin's mistress for 2 years, Leng Mei's first kiss was still there. Today was the 20th anniversary of the Blood Doll organization. At the request of the higher-ups of the organization, Di Lin agreed to organize a camping trip. The Blood Doll organization's members participated. There were close to 50 people going together. The destination this time was a mountain called Qi Mountain. This mountain was nearly 2,000 meters above sea level. Although it wasn't very high compared to the highest mountains in the world, it was still considered high compared to ordinary mountains. Qi Mountain was surrounded by high and low cliffs. If one was not careful and fell down, even if one did not die, it would take a few days and nights to find someone. In short, not only was Qi Mountain far away, but it was also surrounded by clouds all year round. It was also abnormally steep. Leng Mei originally didn't plan to participate in this activity, but Di Lin added Leng Mei's name to the list without her consent. The Blood Doll members soon arrived at the foot of Mount Qi. From the foot of the mountain to the top, Leng Mei walked with Ruoyin. Ruoyin was a nice person. Lung Mei only found out later that Ruoyin wasn't Di Lin's mistress. In addition, Ruoyin was the only one in the Blood Doll organization who was more forthright. Although the two of them would bicker, their relationship was still quite good. At this moment, Ruoyin bumped into Lung Mei and secretly whispered into her ear, "Aren't you going to go with the leader?" Lung Mei was stunned. Then she glanced at Di Lin, who was walking with the Blood Doll organization's higher-ups surrounded him, showing the demeanor of a king. In the end, Lung Mei shook her head. "He doesn't like me. Why should I go with him?" Come. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 27:14. Ruoyin was the first to be unhappy with Lung Mei's words. "He doesn't like you?" Ruoyin put her arm around Lung Mei's shoulder and said, Then tell me, do you like the leader?" Ruoyin's question was asked secretly. When Lung Mei heard it, she was stunned. Coincidentally, Di Lin, who was walking in front, seemed to have heard Ruoyin's question. He turned around and looked over. This glance caused Lung Mei to panic for no reason. "I don't like him," Lung Mei said without hesitation. Di Lin had already turned around. He looked behind Lung Mei and didn't look at her. He didn't hear what she said. All right. Ruoyin wanted to tell Lung Mei that Di Lin definitely liked her. But after hearing Lung Mei's words, she instantly felt that even if she told Lung Mei that Di Lin liked her, Lung Mei wouldn't mind. "Ruoyin, Lung Mei, what are you talking about down there? Hurry up and catch up." At this moment, a cute-looking young man standing beside Di Lin waved at Ruoyin and Lung Mei, laughing merrily. "Talking about women's little secrets. Shoo shoo shoo, what would a guy like you know?" Ruoyin retorted with a half-smile. When she said this, she had a smile on her face as if she was joking. But she still put her arm around Lung Mei's shoulder and followed with big strides. The peak of Mount Qi was quite cool. In this kind of hot weather, a place like Mount Qi was quite suitable for avoiding the heat. At night, a group of people set up their tents. They set up some charcoal fires at the peak of Mount Qi and started barbecuing. Although the Blood Doll was an assassin organization, it was an existence that ordinary people didn't dare to come into contact with. But the members of the Blood Doll were also normal people. Moreover, when the leader of the Blood Doll was still Di Lin, he was very friendly to his subordinates. Now that the Blood Doll was in Di Lin's hands, although he was much stricter than Di Lin, he didn't cancel some activities that the old leaders had always promised. For example, this time's hiking and camping activities. Barbecue. Ruoyin stood up and pulled Lung Mei, who was sitting in the tent, towards the barbecue area. Although Ruoyin was a powerful woman, she could still be an ordinary person at a time like this. Moreover, the old leader had always advocated the organization's activities so that the subordinates of the Blood Doll organization could live a normal life for a few days a year. "I don't want to eat." Lung Mei held her stomach and rejected Ruoyin. She didn't want to see Di Lin. "Then I'll get it for you later." Ruoyin could tell what Lung Mei was thinking at a glance. She didn't insist. 3 minutes later, Ruoyin grabbed a large plate of mutton skewers and walked towards Lung Mei while eating. "I snatched it. Here, let's eat together." Ruoyin stuffed a large plate of mutton skewers into Lung Mei's arms. The two of them looked at the stars and moon in the sky, chatting as they ate. In the Blood Doll organization, Lung Mei and Ruoyin were on par with each other in terms of strength. They were both young but not weak. Therefore they had a common topic to talk about. He finished the last mutton skewer. Ruoyin took the plate of mutton skewers away. Ruoyin carried the mutton skewers to the barbecue area. "You two women are so wasteful. You don't even eat the fatty meat." A man saw them and laughed at Ruoyin. "I'm not the one who doesn't eat the fatty meat. These are all leftovers that Lung Mei doesn't want." Ruoyin pouted and retorted. Just as Ruoyin was about to throw away the rest of the mutton skewers, a large palm stopped her. The first thing she saw was indeed the leader's handsome face. "Give it to me." Chapter 27:15. Almost all the meat on this plate of mutton skewers had been eaten. Only the fat on the mutton skewers had not been eaten. Di Lin suddenly stopped Ruoyin from throwing away the mutton skewers and said this. This shocked Ruoyin, and she immediately handed the mutton skewers in her hand to Di Lin. However, to everyone's surprise, Di Lin took the leftover mutton skewers from Lung Mei and ate the fat on the mutton skewers in a few bites. The subordinates of the Blood Doll organization as well as the higher-ups including Ruoyin, were all dumbfounded by what they saw. "Leader, you?" One of the Blood Doll subordinates saw this scene and exclaimed in shock. "When my father was alive he told you that no matter how rich you are, you must be frugal. Remember, don't let me see you wasting food again." After finishing the remaining fat on the mutton skewers from Leng Mei, Di Lin threw the toothpick on the ground, stood up and said this coldly. Di Lin was a tall and skinny man. In addition to his chiseled face, he had a fair complexion that women would be mesmerized by. However, when he said this, everyone was shocked. Oh. A male subordinate heard Di Lin's words and looked at Di Lin with a shocked expression. He nodded his head vigorously. Why did the chief suddenly cherish food so much this time? They still remembered that there was a time when they were scolded by their old leader for wasting a lot of food. Di Lin had stood up for them. Since when did the chief start to walk the old chief's old path? Cough cough. You hear that? Since you heard it, hurry up and do it. Lick all the fat off the mutton skewers you're eating. Wasting food, shame on you. The little boy who had been following Di Lin looked at the blood doll members with a serious expression and said suddenly. When Ruane heard the little boy's words, she suddenly remembered the leader's words. She covered her mouth and snickered secretly. However, she could not help but think in her heart. Sigh, if Leng Mei also liked the leader, that would be great. At night, 2 o'clock in the morning. Leng Mei was nestled in her tent, but she could not fall asleep for a long time. It had been 2 years and there were already 2 people by the chief's side. She had been his mistress for 2 years. When would he let her go? He retracted his hands slightly and hugged himself tightly. Leng Mei was the kind of person who could appear very lively and active in front of outsiders, but in fact she was very lonely in her heart. Thinking about this, Leng Mei was about to fall asleep. There were dozens of tents set up outside. At this time, most of the people were already asleep. However, just as Leng Mei was about to fall asleep, her tent was suddenly pulled open. Then the person who had unzipped her tent closed it, suddenly hugged her from behind and stroked her. Leng Mei didn't need to turn around to know that it was the leader, Di Lin. Lord Leader, this is. Leng Mei was stunned. Then he lowered his voice and hurriedly spoke. After being his mistress for 2 years, Leng Mei naturally knew what Di Lin wanted to do. But the moment Leng Mei finished speaking, Di Lin had already pulled off her pants and covered her mouth with his other hand. He took off her pants with one hand in 3 seconds. Surrounded by the tents set up by the blood doll members, she fell into a deep sleep. Then he directly entered her. Author has something to say. I have a new book in my space, Death God and Killer Reborn on campus. The novel will be released on July 11th. Everyone can go and take a look. A certain idiot author's QQ number is 2625702229. Also, if you want to read other side stories, be sure to add me on QQ and let me know. Because after the side story is over, this book will truly end. Chapter 27:16. At an altitude of more than 2,000 meters, there were tents all around. Blood Doll's underlings were all lying in the tents. Di Lin tormented Leng Mei in her tent for an hour. Leng Mei bit her red lips hard, not daring to breathe too loudly. Just like before, Di Lin stayed with Leng Mei for an hour and did it for an hour. After he was done, he pulled up his pants and left. Leng Mei did not sleep the entire night in her tent. Since returning from Mount Qi, Leng Mei had been Di Lin's mistress for a few years while everyone was aware of it. And in these few years, Leng Mei's personality had also undergone a tremendous change. Leng Mei's usual weapon had changed from a dagger to a whip. Her 1.7-meter tall figure, coupled with her voluptuous breasts and voluptuous buttocks, made her a hot steamed bun in the eyes of men. Leng Mei had initially thought that her relationship with the chief would stay there for the rest of her life. However, she had secretly inquired about a mission. The chief wanted to send a letter to the top secret agent on the international secret agent ranking, slaying God. Leng Mei had secretly accepted the mission on behalf of the chief. That could be said to be an act of suicide. However, she was not afraid. Moreover, it did not matter to Di Lin whether she would die or not. Therefore, Leng Mei had sneaked out of Blood Doll and went alone to look for Slaying God, the top secret agent on the international secret agent ranking. She was an exquisitely beautiful girl. The first time she had peeked at Yun Jian from the dark, Leng Mei had been subdued by Yun Jian's aura. Leng Mei threw smoke grenades around her. The moment she appeared, she even made a snake-like sound. Oh he. She had revealed Yun Jian's identity in front of Yun Jian and everyone else. However, she had not expected Yun Jian to turn her sharp gaze to her. She did not have to guess to know who she was. Blood Doll's top secret agent, Leng Mei? Leng Mei was shocked when her identity was revealed, but she did not show it on her face. She passed the letter to Yun Jian and wanted to sneak away with a smoke grenade. However, before she could run far, she was subdued by Yun Jian. He was then taken away by Qing Yu and Gun Yanji, who came later. In the beginning Lung Mei was reluctant. Later, when she was at Qing Yu and Gu Nianji's house, they dragged her to play mahjong because they were bored. This rubbing is incredible. That period of time was simply the most comfortable period Lung Mei had ever lived. He didn't have to think about the leader, Di Lin, and spend his days playing mahjong. The most satisfying thing was playing mahjong. Lung Mei would definitely win. He would let Qing Yu and Gu Nianji cook and wash his clothes for him if he won a round. Lung Mei felt that she could be Yun Jian's captive forever. Lung Mei was shocked when she heard that the chief had given the blood doll organization to Yun Jian in order to find her. However, she still wanted to stay at Qing Yu's house. Who wouldn't like to eat and stay for free? When Yun Jian took down the blood doll organization and agreed to let Lung Mei return to Di Lin's side, Yun Jian even went to Qing Yu's house to chase her away. You want me to leave? When Lung Mei heard that Yun Jian was going to let him go, his eyes widened in shock. Yun Jian nodded and kicked open the door to Qing Yu's house with one foot. She flicked her head to the side and revealed a playful smile, signaling Lung Mei to leave. I'm your captive. I'm not leaving. Lung Mei refused to leave no matter what. If one were to talk about captives since ancient times, Lung Mei would definitely be the first one who refused to leave from the bottom of her heart. Seeing how Yun Jian was shooing her away, Lung Mei hugged the door tightly and shouted at Yun Jian in exasperation. Young master, you're not going to make it. I'm not leaving. I'm going to stay here. At most, I'll pay the rent. It's not like I can't afford it. Chapter 27:17. Yun Jian was bored by Lung Mei's rascally attitude. Although Di Lin had agreed to hand blood doll to her, the deal was for Lung Mei. Since Lung Mei refused to leave, she would not force her. What Lung Mei did not know was that not long after she stayed at Qing Yu's house shamelessly, Yun Jian had complained to Di Lin after she went back. The next day Yun Jian led Di Lin and Ruo Yin to Qing Yu's house after making a big detour around Longmen City. Lung Mei wore Qing Yu's bunny compromise, a cute teddy bear pajamas. She was caught red-handed by Di Lin. In the end she was dragged back to Blood Doll by force. After being pressed on the bed by Di Lin for 10 days and 10 nights, Lung Mei took the chance to slip away. This time Lung Mei had learned her lesson. When Gu Nianji tipped her off that Di Lin was coming for her, she plucked up her courage and jumped into the pigsty. The pigsty in the countryside was not clean. The stench almost made Lung Mei faint. In spite of it, she went all out to leave the chief. In the end, she was forced to squeak like a pig. The last time was when Lung Mei grabbed Luo Mei's shoulder and wanted to drag her to find a handsome guy with a giggle, only to be caught by Di Lin. Lung Mei did not want to return to Blood Doll or be a mistress anymore, so she asked Di Lin to end their relationship. She did not expect Di Lin to grab her hand and cut her off. I love you. That's why I forced you to be my woman back then. Listen to me and come back with me. Don't be stubborn anymore or I'll get angry. Lung Mei had Di Lin in her heart too. She had to admit that when she heard what Di Lin said, she was overjoyed. However, it did not show on her face. Reality proved that Lung Mei was indeed pressed on the bed by Di Lin for 10 days and 10 nights after he caught her. Lung Mei felt like her waist was about to break. If Lung Mei felt that Di Lin had changed in any way after this trip, it was that he had become more careful with her. Once, when she was taking a bath in the bathroom, she thought the door was opened and the person who came in was Ruo Yin. Therefore, Lung Mei scratched his scalp and did not even have the time to turn his head to look. Ruo Yin, do you think? Is the chief really? Why am I thinking so much? In any case, I don't like Sir Chief. I will definitely leave him. Definitely. After saying that, Lung Mei felt that it wasn't enough, so she added some more details. Actually, I'm not afraid to tell you that the chief's place is small and narrow. It's not enough, you know? I don't feel good every time. Tell me, how am I going to find other men if I'm really left here by the chief for the rest of my life? His words were so clear and logical that even Lung Mei himself felt that his words were reasonable. However, just as Lung Mei nodded and felt that what she said was very reasonable, she made up her mind to escape again. Behind Lung Mei, a voice that scared Lung Mei out of her wits suddenly rang out. Short and thin? Are you sure? This magnetic voice was just right for a man. There was no tenderness in his deep words. Lung Mei was so shocked that she immediately stood up from the bathtub. Sir Chief. Why is it you? Lung Mei was so shocked that her expression changed. However, Di Lin took a step forward and tore off his bathrobe. Just like that, he stepped into the bathtub that was not tall for him. He grabbed Lung Mei's slender waist and entered her directly. Since you think that I'm small and narrow, how do you explain your expression of ecstasy? Chapter 27:18. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. A photo album. He's shameless. Page 1/1. Caught off guard, Lung Mei pounced on Di Lin. Her lips couldn't help but let out 2 moans. These 2 moans were so soft that even Lung Mei herself didn't believe it was her own voice. However, the truth was that Di Lin was not indecent and Lung Mei enjoyed it. However, Lung Mei would never admit it even if she was beaten to death. Until one day Lung Mei sat on her bed. Di Lin walked in from outside. Di Lin didn't say anything. He just dragged her out. In the Blood Doll Organization's hall. When Lung Mei walked into the Blood Doll Organization's hall, she saw countless members of the organization's upper echelons. At that moment, the Blood Doll Organization's upper echelons were staring at Lung Mei as if they were looking at an unpardonable criminal. Lung Mei was bewildered by their gaze, not knowing what had happened. "Leader, did you really hand the Blood Doll Organization over to slaying God for this woman?" One of the Blood Doll Organization's upper echelons glared at Lung Mei with his round eyes and asked, "Even if you usually dote on her, you shouldn't do that. Our Blood Doll Organization was developed step by step by the old leader to where it is today. How can we just, for a woman?" Among the Blood Doll Organization's upper echelons, another one spoke up after the first one. They were all complaining about how Di Lin doted on Lung Mei. Everyone had seen how he doted on her in the past. It was not a big deal, so they let it go. However, this time, Di Lin had even handed the Blood Doll Organization over to slaying God, the #1 secret agent on the International Secret Agent chart, for Lung Mei. However, Di Lin heard all the insults directed at Lung Mei from his subordinates, but he did not say a word. Lung Mei looked at Di Lin and then at herself, puzzled. What did he mean? Did he want her to listen to the Blood Doll Organization's upper echelon's prejudice against her? He wanted her to understand how stupid it was for her to steal the envelope that he wanted to send to slaying God personally and send it to her without his permission. Lung Mei took a step back. "It's my fault, Lung Mei. I'll take responsibility for what I did. From today onwards, I will withdraw from the Blood Doll Organization. I will never harm you again." Lung Mei wanted to shake off Di Lin's hand, but she couldn't. She grabbed her hair coolly and said to the Blood Doll's higher-ups, "She will leave the Blood Doll Organization." When everyone thought Di Lin wouldn't agree, Di Lin suddenly said. After he finished speaking, Lung Mei was also suddenly stunned, and then his heart turned cold. "So, he also wants me to leave the Blood Doll Organization? If that was the case, then because in 2 months she will marry me as the wife of the leader of the Blood Dolls." While everyone was confused, Di Lin suddenly pulled Lung Mei into his arms and declared his sovereignty in front of everyone in the Blood Doll Organization. Lung Mei stayed in her room and had yet to recover. How could she agree to the leader's request? Where's the ring? It was a proposal ceremony. Not a single one. Lung Mei scratched his head helplessly. At this moment, Di Lin walked into the room. At the same time, he was holding a rectangular object in his hand. At first glance, Lung Mei thought it was a marriage proposal from Di Lin. As expected, Di Lin came to Lung Mei and handed the rectangular object to her. A marriage proposal. Lung Mei blushed when she heard that. She glanced at Di Lin with a "that's more like it" look, then took the rectangular object from him. It was a photo album. She flipped through 2 pages randomly. However, the moment Lung Mei took the photo album and flipped through 2 pages, her face turned redder than a monkey's butt. This photo album. It was all in this photo album. All of it. It was all of the expressions on her face and her long, slender legs that were wrapped around his body when they were doing it. There were also photos of her being intimate with him in various places. When did he do it? How could he take such embarrassing photos and save them in a photo album? Shameless. Book Guest House Reading Website. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.